The bitter wind howled across the Montana plains, erasing all traces of the narrow trail beneath a blanket of white. Emma Wilson clutched her woolen shawl tighter, her frozen fingers trembling as she peered into the whiteout conditions ahead. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wagon creaked and groaned under the assault of the storm, its weathered wood no match for nature's fury. Inside the covered section, twin infants, barely 6 months old, whimpered softly, their cries nearly swallowed by the merciless howl of the blizzard. Emma glanced at the rapidly disappearing sun, terror gripping her heart. Nightfall in these conditions meant certain death. With supplies dwindling and the temperature plummeting, she whispered a desperate prayer into the frigid air. Just 3 days ago, she had been a desperate widow with hope. Now she was a mother facing the unthinkable, the very real possibility that none of them would live to see morning. That's when she saw it, a silhouette emerging from the swirling snow. A lone rider approached, his face obscured beneath a frost-covered hat. Emma reached for the rifle at her side, unsure if this stranger brought salvation or danger. Either way, she was prepared to fight with her last breath for her babies' lives. The year was 1887, and the Montana Territory remained a patchwork of civilization and wilderness. The railroad had brought progress to some regions, but vast stretches remained untamed, challenging even the hardiest of settlers. For those seeking a fresh start, the territory represented both opportunity and peril, a gamble that some would win and others would lose at terrible cost. Emma Wilson had once been full of optimism. At 24, she had followed her husband, Thomas West from Pennsylvania, her nursing training and his carpentry skills promising them a future in the booming territories. They had settled on a small homestead along Widow's Ridge, a name that would later seem like a cruel prophecy. The key: land was beautiful but demanding, with harsh winters that tested their resolve and scorching summers that withered crops without mercy. "This will be our legacy," Thomas had promised, his blue eyes bright with dreams as he placed his hands on Emma's growing belly. "Our children will inherit a life we've built with our own hands." Those words echoed painfully in Emma's mind as she stood at the simple wooden cross marking his grave just 1.5 years later. A falling tree during a clearing operation, so mundane, yet so final. Thomas never even met the twins who arrived 3 months after his death, Lily with her father's eyes and Lucas with his determined chin. Pine Creek was the closest settlement, little more than a cluster of buildings with a general store, livery, stable, and saloon. It was there that Emma first heard the whispers, sympathetic at first, then increasingly pointed as winter approached. "Those poor babies won't survive the season out at that failing homestead. She ought to sell while she can and head back east. No woman alone can manage that land, especially not with infants." Emma had ignored them, stubbornly clinging to Thomas's dream. But as autumn faded and the first snows arrived, reality became impossible to deny. The crops had yielded barely enough to feed her, let alone provide income. The roof leaked in 3 places, and the twins' needs were constant, a never-ending cycle of feeding, changing, and soothing that left her exhausted and hollow-eyed. The letter from her sister in Silverdale arrived like divine intervention. "Come stay with us. Robert's Mercantile is doing well. There's room for you and the children, and the town needs a nurse. Please, Emma, before winter truly sets in." 100 miles separated Emma from this lifeline. Ordinarily a journey of a week in good conditions, but good conditions were rapidly disappearing as December arrived. Still, Emma made her choice. She sold what furniture she could to neighbors, packed the wagon with essentials, bundled the twins in every blanket they owned, and set out. The first day passed uneventfully. the twins surprisingly content as the wagon rocked them along the trail. Emma camped near a stream, keeping a small fire burning through the night. The second day brought darker skies and a sharp drop in temperature. By midday, snowflakes began to fall, delicate at first, then increasingly insistent. "Just a passing flurry," Emma assured herself, tucking the blankets more securely around the babies. She stopped at Elk Valley Trading Post as the snow intensified, hoping to wait out the weather. Clara Montgomery, the storekeeper's wife, took one look at the young mother and twins and ushered them inside. "You can't continue today," Clara insisted, her weathered face creased with concern. "My Henry says this storm's building to something fierce. Stay the night, at least." Emma hesitated, counting the precious coins in her purse. "I can't afford—" "No charge," Clara interrupted firmly. "Not for a mother with little ones. I had twins myself once, lost them both to fever when they were 4. Her voice caught. "Would have given anything for someone to help us then." That night, as wind rattled the trading post's windows, Emma listened to travelers talk from her small corner room. Silas Mercer and his boys were spotted near Devil's Pass, a gruff voice reported. "Stole 15 head of cattle from the Henderson place." "Heard they don't leave witnesses," another added, "especially since that marshal's been tracking them." Emma clutched her babies closer, fear mingling with doubt. Perhaps she should wait longer at the trading post, but each day meant dwindling funds and increased uncertainty. Her sister was expecting them before Christmas. Morning brought momentary hope as the snow paused, though the sky remained threatening. Against Clara's protests, Emma readied to depart. "At least take the southern route," Clara urged, pressing extra supplies into Emma's hands. "Longer, but safer than Devil's Pass, and watch the weather. If it turns again, find shelter immediately." Emma nodded gratefully, touched by the woman's kindness. "I'll be careful. We need to reach Silverdale before the worst of winter sets in." "God be with you," Clara whispered, gently touching each twin's cheek. The journey resumed with an oppressive sky overhead. Emma kept a watchful eye on the clouds while navigating the unfamiliar southern trail. By midday, the temperature had dropped further, and the first flakes began swirling again, larger and more determined than before. Then came the sickening crack from beneath the wagon, followed by a lurch that nearly threw Emma from her seat. The left rear wheel tilted at an unnatural angle. The axle splintered beyond repair. Emma sat frozen for several heartbeats, disbelief warring with rising panic. They were miles from the trading post, hours from any known shelter, with a storm bearing down and darkness approaching. The twins, disturbed by the sudden stop, began to fuss. "It's all right," she murmured, her voice thin even to her own ears. "Mama will figure something out." She climbed down to assess the damage, the snow already accumulating around her boots. The axle was irreparable without tools and assistance she didn't have. Emma glanced at the horse, an aging mare named Penny that had been with them since Pennsylvania. Could the animal carry all 3 of them? There was no choice but to try. With trembling hands, Emma unhitched Penny from the wagon. Using blankets and rope, she fashioned a sling that would allow her to carry both twins against her chest. The most essential supplies, food, matches, 1 cooking pot, and an extra blanket, went into a sack secured behind the saddle. Everything else, the furniture Thomas had lovingly crafted, the family Bible with their history inscribed, the small keepsakes of their life together, would remain with the abandoned wagon, left to the mercy of the elements and whoever might. "Pass this way." As Emma mounted Penny, with the twins secured against her, the snow began falling in earnest. The southern route was already disappearing beneath the white onslaught. She pulled her scarf higher, covering the lower half of her face, and nudged Penny forward. "Just keep moving," she whispered. "Keep moving." Hours blurred together as the storm intensified. Emma's world narrowed to the space between heartbeats. The rhythmic plodding of Penny's hooves, the precious weight of the twins against her chest, the biting cold that seeped through layers of clothing to gnaw at her bones. She couldn't feel her fingers or toes anymore, and her thoughts were becoming dangerously sluggish. Twice she caught herself nodding off and jerked awake with heart-stopping terror. Sleep meant death in these conditions. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The twins had grown ominously quiet, their small faces tucked against her, protected as much as possible from the driving snow. When Penny stumbled for the third time, Emma knew they couldn't continue. The horse was exhausted, steam rising from her heaving flanks only to freeze in crystalline patterns on her coat. The storm had become a howling white prison, visibility reduced to mere feet. "Please, God," Emma prayed, tears freezing on her cheeks, "help us." Through the curtain of snow, she glimpsed what appeared to be a large rock formation, perhaps enough to provide minimal shelter from the wind. Emma guided Penny toward it, her hope flaring weakly. As they drew closer, the formation revealed itself to be the entrance to a small canyon. The narrow walls offered some protection from the wind, though snow still swirled overhead. Emma dismounted with difficulty, her limbs stiff and unresponsive. The twins whimpered as the movement disturbed them. "Shh, my loves," she soothed automatically, though her cracked lips could barely form the words. She led Penny deeper into the canyon, searching for any additional shelter. There, a slight overhang in the rock face created a shallow cave-like space, barely deep enough for them to huddle inside. Emma tied Penny nearby, where the horse could benefit from the canyon walls blocking the worst of the wind. With numbed fingers, Emma attempted to start a fire using twigs and branches that had been protected from the snow by the overhang. The matches trembled in her grasp, several wasted before a tiny flame took hold. She fed it carefully, desperately, knowing this fire might be the difference between life and death. As night descended fully, the temperature plummeted further. Emma unwrapped the twins to check on them, her heart seizing at their unusual stillness. Lily's fingers and toes were alarmingly cold, her normally rosy cheeks pale. Lucas fared slightly better, but his breathing seemed too shallow. Emma tucked them inside her coat against her skin, willing her body heat to warm them. The fire helped, but it was small and constantly threatened by gusts finding their way into their meager shelter. She knew with grim certainty that they wouldn't survive another day like this, perhaps not even the night. She must have dozed despite her determination to stay awake. The sound that roused her, different from the constant moan of the wind, took several moments to register. Hoofbeats, someone was approaching. Fear and hope warred within her. Who would be traveling in such conditions? It could be help, or it could be the Mercer gang Clara had warned about. Emma reached for the revolver Thomas had insisted she learn to use, her hand closing around the cold metal as a figure appeared at the canyon entrance. All she could make out was the silhouette of a rider on horseback, tall and imposing against the swirling white backdrop. The stranger dismounted, securing his horse before approaching their shelter. Emma raised the gun with trembling hands. "Stay back," she called, her voice cracking. "I'm armed." The figure paused, then raised both hands slowly. "Ma'am, I mean no harm. Saw your fire." The voice was deep, with an accent she couldn't place. "You shouldn't be out here in this storm." "Neither should you," Emma countered, not lowering the weapon. A soft chuckle emerged from beneath the frost-covered scarf that obscured most of his face. "Fair point," he gestured toward the twins. "You got young ones with you?" The concern in his voice seemed genuine, but Emma had heard too many cautionary tales about the territories to trust easily. "My children and I are fine, just waiting out the weather." The stranger stood silent for a moment, then spoke again, his tone gentle but firm. "Ma'am, respectfully, you're not fine. This storm's just getting started and this shelter won't hold. My ranch is about 3 miles east. Solid. Walls, warm fire, food." As if to emphasize his point, a violent gust of wind sent snow swirling into their shelter, nearly extinguishing the precious fire. One of the twins, Lucas, let out a weak cry. "Those babies need proper warmth," the stranger continued. "So do you," Emma wavered, desperation warring with distrust. "How do I know I can trust you?" The man slowly lowered his scarf, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind. His features were striking, high cheekbones and eyes that seemed to hold both kindness and sorrow in equal measure. "Name's Jack Calloway. I run the Broken Spoke Ranch." He paused. "I give you my word, as a man who's seen too much death already, I won't let harm come to you or your children." Perhaps it was exhaustion clouding her judgment, or perhaps some instinct recognized truth in his words. Either way, Emma knew they had no real choice. She lowered the gun. "Emma Wilson," she said finally, "these are my twins, Lily and Lucas." Jack nodded, moving forward slowly, as if approaching a skittish colt. "We need to move fast. Storm's getting worse." He glanced at the makeshift sling. "That how you carry them?" Emma nodded, already gathering their meager supplies. "Smart thinking," Jack commented, helping to extinguish the fire safely. "But you'll ride with me. My thunder's stronger, and I know the way even in this whiteout." He helped Emma mount his horse, a magnificent black stallion that stood patiently despite the howling wind. Then he handed her the twins before swinging. Up behind her, his arms creating a secure barrier on either side as he took the reins. Penny was tethered to follow behind. "Hold on," he instructed, his breath warm against her ear as they set off into the storm. Emma clutched her babies close, acutely aware of the stranger's solid presence at her back. She had just entrusted their lives to a man she had known for mere minutes. A desperate gamble in desperate times. As they rode through the blinding snow, Emma offered another prayer, this time not just for survival, but for the wisdom of her choice. Everything she cared about in the world was now at the mercy of a lone cowboy whose eyes spoke of his own unspoken sorrows. What neither of them knew was that the storm was driving others to seek shelter as well, including Silas Mercer and his notorious gang. And their paths were about to cross at Broken Spoke Ranch. The journey to Broken Spoke Ranch seemed eternal. Emma's world had narrowed to the sound of Thunder's labored breathing, the precious bundle secured against her chest, and the solid presence of Jack Calloway behind her. The blizzard raged with unrelenting fury, shrouding everything in a ghostly, white veil that obscured landmarks and direction alike. Only Jack's unwavering confidence guided them through the treacherous terrain. "Not much farther now," Jack reassured her, his voice barely audible above the wind's howl. "There's a ridge up ahead. Once we cross that, the ranch is in the valley below." Emma nodded mutely, too cold and exhausted for words. The twins had grown alarmingly still against her, their tiny bodies conserving what little warmth remained. She found herself counting their breaths, panic rising whenever a pause stretched too long. "Stay with me, little ones," she whispered. "Just a bit longer." The ridge Jack mentioned appeared suddenly through the curtain of white, a dark, jagged line against the colorless world. Thunder carefully picked his way up the slope, his powerful muscles straining against the accumulated snow. Behind them, Penny struggled to follow, her head bowed against the wind. "We'll need to lead the horses down," Jack explained as they reached the summit. "Too steep and slippery to ride safely." Emma allowed him to help her dismount, her legs nearly buckling as they touched ground. Jack's strong hand caught her elbow, steadying her without comment. She was grateful for his matter-of-fact assistance, devoid of pity or judgment. The descent was treacherous, each step a careful negotiation with the ice-slicked slope. Jack led Thunder with one hand while supporting Emma with the other, occasionally pausing to check on Penny's progress behind them. When Emma stumbled, nearly falling, Jack simply tightened his grip without breaking stride. "There she is," he announced finally, gesturing toward a dark shape materializing through the snow. Home. Broken Spoke Ranch emerged from the storm like a mirage. A sturdy two-story cabin with a wide porch and adjacent barn. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, promising warmth within. Several outbuildings clustered nearby, their forms indistinct, in the swirling white. "Can you make it a few more yards?" Jack asked, eyeing her with concern. Emma straightened her shoulders. "I've come this far." He nodded approvingly and led them toward the barn rather than the house. "Need to get the horses settled first. It'll be warmer inside anyway." The barn doors groaned as Jack pushed them open against the accumulated snow. The interior was blissfully sheltered from the wind, the familiar smells of hay and animals, a welcome change from the sterile scent of ice. Several horses nickered softly in greeting, their curious faces appearing over stall doors. Jack worked efficiently, removing Thunder's tack before guiding Penny to an empty stall. "I'll get them fed and rubbed down later. Right now, you and those babies need tending." He led Emma through a side door connecting the barn directly to the cabin's kitchen, a practical design in harsh Montana winters. The wave of warmth that greeted them made Emma's frozen skin tingle painfully, tears springing to her eyes at the simple pleasure of heat. The kitchen was spacious but modest, dominated by a large cook stove, radiating blessed warmth. Copper pots hung from ceiling hooks, and bundles of dried herbs dangled from exposed beams. A rough-hewn table with 4 chairs stood in the center, a half-empty coffee cup suggesting Jack's hasty departure earlier. "Let's get you out of those wet things," Jack said practically, already shrugging off his own snow-crusted coat. "Then we'll see to the little ones." Emma hesitated, suddenly acutely aware of their situation. Alone in this remote cabin with a man she'd just met. Jack seemed to read her thoughts. "There's a bedroom just through there." He indicated a doorway. "Off the kitchen. You can change in private. I'll find some dry clothes that might work." He paused, his expression softening as he glanced at the twins. "Do they need feeding? I can heat some milk." The simple question, so practical and unthreatening, eased some of Emma's tension. "Yes, they do. Thank you." Jack nodded and busied himself at the stove while Emma retreated to the offered bedroom. It was sparsely furnished with a narrow bed, washstand, and wooden chest. The walls were unadorned, save for a single photograph she couldn't make out in the dim light. Emma carefully unwrapped the twins, her breath catching at their bluish lips and unnaturally pale skin. "No, no, no," she murmured, rubbing their tiny limbs to stimulate circulation. They responded weakly, Lily with a faint whimper, and Lucas by turning his face toward her warmth. A soft knock at the door startled her. "Mom, brought some dry things and warm water for washing up." Emma clutched the blanket around herself. "Just a moment." She quickly wrapped the twins again and opened the door just enough to accept the offered items. The clothing was clearly too large, men's clothing, worn but clean, but the thick woolen socks, flannel shirt and trousers would be far warmer than her sodden dress. Emma changed quickly, rolling up sleeves and pant legs before attending to the twins. With gentle thoroughness, she stripped off their damp clothing and bathed each tiny limb in the warm water, her nurse's training guiding her movements. As their skin pinkened under her ministrations, relief washed over her. Hypothermia had set in, but not beyond recovery. She dressed them in the tiny gowns Jack had somehow produced, clearly not meant for infants, but soft pieces of fabric he'd found and hastily adapted. When they emerged from the bedroom, Jack was at the stove, stirring something that filled the kitchen with a rich, savory aroma. He glanced up, his eyes warm with approval at their improved appearance. "Found these," he said, gesturing to a pile of quilts near the stove. "Thought we could make a little nest for them where it's warmest." Emma arranged the quilts into a makeshift crib, tucking the twins securely within view of the stove, but not too close. Only then did she notice the steaming mug Jack had set on the table. "Drink," he encouraged. "It's just broth, but it'll warm you from the inside. Stew's almost ready." The broth was simple but flavorful, spreading warmth through Emma's body as she sipped gratefully. She watched Jack move about the kitchen with easy competence, setting out bowls and cutting bread from a loaf. "You've done this before," she observed, caring for children. A shadow crossed Jack's features so quickly she almost missed it. "Had a family once," he said after a pause, his voice neutral. "Long time ago." The simple statement held volumes of unspoken history. Emma recognized grief when she saw it, had lived with its reflection in her mirror for over a year. She didn't press for details. "Thank you," she said instead, "for finding us. Another hour out there?" Jack nodded, understanding the sentence she couldn't complete. "Sometimes the Montana Territory gives and sometimes it takes." He ladled stew into bowls. "Tonight, it gave me the chance to help. That's all." As they ate in companionable silence, Emma studied her host surreptitiously. Jack Calloway was not what she had expected in a frontier rancher. His hands were calloused from work, yes, but he handled the ceramic bowls with unexpected gentleness. Though weathered, his face bore none of the hardness she'd seen in many frontier men, and there was something in his features, the high cheekbones, the straight black hair that hinted at mixed heritage. "You mentioned milk for the twins?" Emma asked as they finished eating. "Goat's milk," Jack confirmed, rising to retrieve a small pitcher from the cool box. "Keeps a nanny goat for cheese. Milk should be gentle enough for little ones in a pinch, though I reckon it's not what they're used to." Emma smiled faintly. "At this point, anything warm will do." She watched as Jack poured milk into a small pot to warm, then surprised her by producing 2 clean medicine droppers from a cabinet. "Might be easier than spoons," he explained, catching her questioning. "Look, used them for feeding orphaned lambs last spring." His foresight and practical solutions impressed Emma. As a healer herself, she recognized the problem-solving mind of someone accustomed to making do with limited resources. Once the milk was warmed, they worked together to feed the twins. Jack, carefully administering drops to Lucas, while Emma tended to Lily. The babies accepted the unfamiliar milk eagerly, their color improving with each swallow. "You're good with them," Emma commented, watching Jack's careful handling of her son. A fleeting smile crossed his face. "They're fighters, these two. Got a strong will to live." He glanced up at Emma, like their mother. The simple observation, delivered, without flattery or condescension, touched Emma deeply. Since Thomas's death, most people had regarded her with pity or doubt, questioning her ability to survive without a husband. Jack's matter-of-fact acknowledgement of her strength felt like validation of everything she'd endured. After the twins were fed and settled again in their quilt nest, Jack stoked the fire and pulled 2 rocking chairs closer to the stove. "Storm's not letting up," he observed, nodding toward the frost-covered windows where wind-driven snow pelted relentlessly. "Might as well get comfortable. You're safe here for as long as needed." Emma sank gratefully into the offered chair, her body finally registering the full extent of its exhaustion. The gentle rocking motion and penetrating warmth from the stove were almost hypnotic after the day's ordeal. "I should check on Penny," she murmured, fighting to keep her eyes open. "Already did while you were changing," Jack assured her. "She's fed, watered, and bedded down with fresh straw. She'll be fine." Emma nodded, relieved. "We were headed to Silverdale," she explained, feeling she owed him some account of their presence in the storm. "My sister lives there. After Thomas, my husband, died, the homestead became too much with the twins." "Silverdale's a good town," Jack commented, "but that's nearly 60 miles from here in good conditions." In this weather? He shook his head. The wagon broke down, Emma continued. An axle cracked. I thought we could make it on horseback. She closed her eyes briefly. I was a fool. No, Jack's voice was firm. You were desperate and brave. There's a difference. Something in his tone made Emma look up, meeting eyes that held no judgment, only understanding born of hard experience. You did what you had to do for your family, he continued. Can't fault a person for that. The simple absolution loosened something tight in Emma's chest. For months, she'd carried the weight of every decision alone, second-guessing herself. At every turn, Jack's straightforward acceptance of her choices, even the risky ones, felt like permission to forgive herself. What about you? She asked, changing the subject. Running a ranch this size alone seems foolhardy, Jack supplied with a wry smile. I was going to say challenging. He chuckled softly. It is that. Usually have a couple hands helping. But they rode into Pine Creek 3 days back for supplies. Got caught there by the storm, I expect. His expression grew more serious. Ranch was my uncle's. He was Cherokee, my mother's brother. Took me in after my parents died of fever when I was 12. The information was offered simply, without self-pity. Emma recognized it for what it was, a fair exchange. She had shared her circumstances. He was sharing his. Your uncle taught you well, she observed, glancing around the well-ordered kitchen. This place feels, she searched for the right word, sustainable. Jack nodded, clearly pleased by her choice of term. That was Uncle Nathaniel's word. Exactly. A man must build something that sustains, Jack, he'd say. Not just himself, but the land and those who come after. A fond smile crossed his face. He was full of such wisdom, not always easy for a hot-headed youth to appreciate. And now you're alone here? Emma asked carefully. The question hung in the air between them. Jack's fingers stilled on the arm of the rocking chair, his gaze fixed on some middle distance beyond the room. By choice mostly, he finally answered. Had a wife once, Sarah, a daughter too, Hannah. His voice softened on the names. Smallpox took them both 8 years ago while I was away driving cattle to Fort Benton. The simple statement explained so much. The solitude, the shadow that occasionally crossed his features, the gentle competence with the twins. Emma recognized the particular pain of a parent who had outlived their child. I'm sorry, she said simply, knowing from experience that elaborate condolences often rang hollow. Jack acknowledged her words with a slight nod. Life goes on. Has to. Outside, the wind howled with renewed vigor, rattling the windows in their frames. One of the twins, Lily, stirred in her sleep, tiny fingers flexing before settling again. The momentary disruption seemed to remind both adults of more immediate concerns. You should rest while they're sleeping, Jack suggested, rising from his chair. I'll keep the fire going and check on them if they wake. Emma wanted to object that she couldn't impose further, but exhaustion dragged at her like quicksand. The prospect of uninterrupted sleep was too tempting to resist. Just for an hour, she conceded. Jack nodded, knowing full well she would sleep longer. Take my room upstairs, first door on the right. It's warmer than the others. I'll sleep. Down here by the stove with the little ones. Too tired to argue, Emma made her way up the narrow staircase Jack indicated. His room was simply furnished but comfortable, dominated by a large bed with a patchwork quilt. Unlike the guest room below, this space contained evidence of its occupant. Books, stacked on a bedside table, a guitar in one corner, a chest at the foot of the bed carved with Cherokee symbols. Emma sank onto the edge of the mattress, removing the borrowed boots, but otherwise remaining dressed. Just a brief rest, she told herself as her head touched the pillow. Just until the twins need feeding again. She was asleep instantly, her body surrendering to the bone-deep exhaustion of the past days. Downstairs, Jack settled into the rocking chair beside the sleeping twins, prepared for his night's vigil. Outside, the blizzard continued its assault, howling winds driving snow. Against the cabin in white waves, dawn broke with eerie silence. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a transformed landscape buried under feet of pristine snow. The sun glinted off the white expanse, creating a dazzling brilliance that was beautiful and blinding in equal measure. Emma woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. Panic seized her as she remembered the twins, sending her bolting upright in bed. Sunlight streamed through the frosted window, indicating she had slept far longer than the intended hour. She hurried downstairs to find Jack at the stove, a twin cradled in each arm as he hummed a soft melody. The babies were awake and content, their eyes tracking his movements with solemn interest. "Morning," he greeted her, unruffled by his dual arm load. "Coffee's hot." Emma stared at the tableau, momentarily speechless. The fearsome cowboy who had emerged from the blizzard now looked completely at ease with her infants, his large hands supporting them with practiced confidence. "They've been fed and changed," Jack continued matter-of-factly. "Found some clean cloths in the linen press that worked for wrappings. Hope that's all right." "You did all that?" Emma asked, accepting the coffee he somehow managed to pour despite his occupied arms. "Seemed simple enough," he shrugged. "This one here," he indicated Lucas, "has quite the appetite. And this little lady," nodding to Lily, "is particular about having dry wrappings. Reminds me of my Hannah, couldn't abide being wet or dirty for a moment." The casual mention of his daughter, without the shadow that had accompanied it last night, suggested a healing Emma understood well. Some days, the memories brought pain. Other days, a bittersweet comfort. "Thank you," she said, reaching to take Lucas from him. "For everything." Jack relinquished the baby with obvious reluctance. No hardship. Been too quiet around here for too long. They settled into a surprisingly comfortable routine over breakfast, taking turns holding babies, while the other ate. Jack described the ranch operations, the cattle herd wintering in the sheltered southern valley, the hay stored in the loft, the root cellar stocked for the season. "Storm's broken, but we won't be going anywhere for a few days," he explained. "Snow's too deep, and more's likely coming. Telegraph lines will be down too, so no way to get word to your sister." Emma nodded, having anticipated as much. "We're imposing on your hospitality." "Nonsense," Jack interrupted firmly. "I'd be here alone otherwise, with too much food and firewood for one man. You're welcome to stay until safe travel's possible." His sincere welcome eased Emma's concerns about their unexpected residence. After breakfast, Jack proposed a tour of the ranch house, starting with a proper introduction to the bedroom she had glimpsed the night before. "This was meant to be a guest room," he explained, showing her the small but comfortable space off the kitchen. "My uncle built it for visiting Cherokee relatives. Never had much use for it myself, but it's yours for as long as you need." The room looked different in daylight, warm and inviting, with a colorful woven blanket on the bed and a small window overlooking the snowbound yard. The photograph she had noticed last night turned out to be a daguerreotype of an older man with features similar to Jack's, standing proudly beside a much younger version of her host. "Uncle Nathaniel," Jack confirmed, following her gaze. "Taken the day he signed the deed over to me. Said a man should see himself as caretaker, not owner of the land." The tour continued upstairs, where Jack showed her 2 additional bedrooms, one clearly unused for some time, its furnishings draped with cloths. Emma didn't need to ask to know it had been his daughter's room. The remainder of the house revealed a space that was functional rather than decorative, though touches of beauty appeared in unexpected places: handcrafted furniture, woven rugs with Cherokee patterns, shelves lined with well-worn books. It was the home of a man who valued craftsmanship and learning alongside practicality. "It's a wonderful place," Emma said sincerely as they returned to the kitchen. "You've built something truly sustaining here." Jack's expression softened at her deliberate echo of his earlier words. "Tried to. Some days it feels like enough." The unspoken implication that most days it didn't hung in the air between them. Their contemplation was interrupted by a sound that froze them both, the distant jingling of harness bells and voices carrying across the snow. Jack moved swiftly to the window, his posture suddenly alert. "Riders coming," he reported, his voice tight. "5 of them, not my hands." He turned to Emma, his expression grave. "Get the twins and go to the root cellar. There's a door behind the pantry." Emma gathered the babies quickly, alarmed by the sudden change in Jack's demeanor. "Who is it?" "Why, don't know for certain," he cut her off, already moving toward a cabinet where he retrieved a rifle. "But decent folks don't travel in groups that size right after a blizzard." He checked the weapon with practiced efficiency. "Could be nothing, could be trouble. Either way, I want you and the little ones out of sight." The urgency in his voice brooked no argument. Emma hurried to collect the twins, who protested the sudden disruption with whimpers. Jack led them to the pantry, revealing a narrow door she hadn't noticed during their tour. 15 steps down," he instructed, lighting a lantern and handing it to her. "Stay quiet. I'll come get you when it's safe." The root cellar was surprisingly large and well organized, with shelves of preserved vegetables, fruits, and meats lining the walls. A small bench sat against one wall, evidence that Jack occasionally spent time here, perhaps during tornado season. Emma settled on it with a twin in each arm, straining to hear the muffled sounds from above. Heavy boots thumped across the porch boards, followed by a loud knock. Jack's voice carried faintly through the floorboards, too indistinct to make out words. Other voices responded, multiple men speaking at once, their tones insistent. Emma held her breath, cuddling the twins closer as they began to fuss at the strange environment. "Shh, my loves," she whispered. "We must be very quiet now." Above, the voices grew louder. A thud suggested someone had pushed their way inside. The twins, sensing their mother's tension, began to cry in earnest. Emma rocked them desperately, trying to soothe their distress while straining to hear what was happening. A sudden crash overhead made her jump. Something heavy had fallen or been thrown. Then came the sound she dreaded most, a gunshot, followed by shouting and the unmistakable noise of a struggle. The twins' cries intensified, Lucas's face reddening with effort. Emma's heart raced as she calculated her options. The cellar offered safety, but also confinement. If something happened to Jack, no one would know they were here, which might mean safety or slow starvation. More thumps and crashes sounded overhead, followed by another gunshot. Then, abruptly, silence, more terrifying than the noise had been. Emma waited, counting her heartbeats, torn between hiding and investigating. Before she could decide, heavy footsteps crossed the kitchen floor directly above her head. The pantry door creaked open. "Mrs. Wilson?" a voice called, not Jack's. "We know you're down there. Best come up now, nice and easy." Emma's blood turned to ice. How did they know her name? Where was Jack? She remained frozen, clutching her. Crying children. "Don't make this difficult," the voice continued. "We ain't got quarrel with you or them babies. Just need to discuss some business." The cellar door swung open, revealing a silhouette against the kitchen light. Emma shrank back, unable to make out features against the brightness. The figure descended several steps, resolving into a lean man with a deeply scarred face and cold eyes. He held a revolver casually at his side. "There you are," he said, his tone almost conversational. "I'm Silas Mercer. Seems we need to have Talk about what you saw back at Elk Valley Trading Post." Emma's confusion must have shown on her face because Mercer laughed without humor. "Playing innocent? Won't wash, ma'am. Clara Montgomery has quite the loose tongue. Told us all about the widow and twins heading to Silverdale." His expression hardened, right after she told us about seeing my boys there the day Jackson was shot. Realization dawned on Emma. This man thought she had witnessed something at the Trading Post, something connecting him to a shooting she knew nothing about. Before she could speak, another voice called down, "Bring her up, Silas. Calloway ain't talking." The mention of Jack sent a chill through Emma. She rose slowly, balancing the twins in her arms, and followed Mercer up the steps with leaden feet. The kitchen she had found so welcoming hours earlier was now in disarray. Chairs overturned, the table shoved aside. Jack knelt in the center of the room, hands bound behind him, a trickle of blood running from his temple. 3 other men stood, around him all armed. Jack's eyes met Emma's, filled with regret and anger. "Told you she just arrived last night in the storm," he spat at Mercer. "She doesn't know anything about your business." "Maybe," Mercer conceded, studying Emma with calculating eyes. "But better safe than sorry in my line of work." He gestured to one of his men. "Check the barn and outbuildings. Make sure there's no one else around." The indicated man nodded and left. Mercer turned his attention back to Emma, his gaze flicking to the twins. "Quite a predicament you found yourself in, Mrs. Wilson. A broken-down wagon, a blizzard, and now this unpleasantness." He sighed theatrically. "Life's full of bad luck, ain't it?" Emma stood straighter, summoning every ounce of composure she possessed. "I don't know what you think I saw, Mr. Mercer, but I was only at the trading post to shelter from the storm. I spoke with Mrs. Montgomery about the weather, nothing more." Mercer's eyes narrowed skeptically. "That's so, and she didn't mention that Marshal Jackson had been asking questions about stolen cattle. Didn't happen to point out me or my boys." Emma shook her head firmly. "She warned me about traveling in the storm with children, that's all." It wasn't entirely true. Clara had mentioned Mercer by name, but Emma hoped the partial truth would be convincing. Mercer studied her for a long moment, then turned to Jack. "And you just happened to find her in the storm. Mighty convenient." Jack's expression remained defiant. "Nothing convenient about riding through a blizzard. Did what any decent man would do." One of Mercer's men snorted derisively. "Decent? A half-breed living alone on land that should belong to white settlers." Jack's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, his eyes never leaving Emma's. Something in his gaze communicated a message. Keep them talking. Play along. The man who had checked the outbuildings returned, stomping snow from his boots. "Place is empty, just horses and livestock. Found tracks heading east, but the snows covered most of them." Mercer nodded thoughtfully. "Ranch hands." "Likely," the man confirmed. "Old trails before the storm." The information seemed to ease some of Mercer's tension. He pulled out a chair that had remained upright and sat down, gesturing for Emma to do the same, with the overturned table between them. "Here's how I see our situation, Mrs. Wilson," he began, his tone almost friendly. "You may or may not have information that could be problematic for my associates and me. Your friend here," he nodded toward Jack, "has been less than cooperative about other matters of interest to us." "The ranch," Jack growled. "They want the water rights." Mercer smiled thinly. "Practical man, your host. This valley controls access to the best water source for 20 miles. Very valuable to someone running cattle." He leaned forward. "I've made fair offers. Mr. Calloway has been unreceptive." "It's Cherokee land," Jack stated flatly, "protected by treaty." One of Mercer's men laughed openly. "Treaties with savages, worth less than the paper they're written on." Emma felt a flash of anger on Jack's behalf. She had heard such sentiments before. The casual dismissal of agreements with native peoples, the assumption that their claims to land were inherently inferior. It was the same arrogant thinking that had fueled so much bloodshed throughout our territories. "What do you want from us?" she asked directly, keeping her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. Mercer seemed pleased by her directness. Smart woman. "I want several things, Mrs. Wilson. First, assurance that you'll forget anything Clara Montgomery might have mentioned about me or my business. Second," his gaze shifted to Jack, "I want Calloway here to reconsider my generous offer for this property." "And if we refuse?" Emma asked, already knowing the answer. Mercer shrugged, the gesture chillingly casual. "Winter's a dangerous time. Accidents happen. Bodies aren't found until spring thaw." His eyes flickered to the twins. "Would be a shame for those little ones to grow up orphans again." The naked threat made Emma's blood run cold. Jack lunged against his restraints, earning a brutal backhand from one of Mercer's men that split his lip. "You're businessmen, you say?" Emma responded, fighting to keep her voice from trembling. "Surely businessmen understand the concept of witnesses and consequences." Mercer raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Go on." "My sister in Silverdale is expecting me," Emma continued, her mind racing. "She knows my route and who I plan to speak with along the way. If I don't arrive, there will be questions, searches." She met Mercer's gaze directly. "How good is business when every lawman in the territory is looking for you?" It was a desperate bluff. Her sister knew only that she was coming, not her exact route or timeline, but Emma gambled that Mercer wouldn't risk calling her bluff without certainty. A tense silence followed her words. Jack's expression remained carefully neutral, but she caught the flicker of approval in his eyes. "Besides," she added, inspiration striking, "I'm a nurse by training. I notice things others might miss." She nodded toward one of Mercer's men, who had been favoring his right arm. "Your man there has the beginnings of blood poisoning from that cut on his forearm. I can smell it from here. Without proper treatment, he'll lose the arm within days, if not his life." The man in question looked startled, unconsciously touching his bandaged arm. Mercer's eyes narrowed, reassessing Emma with newfound wariness. "A nurse," he repeated thoughtfully. "Useful skill on the frontier." "Very," Emma agreed, sensing a possible opening. "Especially for men who occasionally suffer workplace injuries." Mercer laughed suddenly, a genuine sound of amusement. "Mrs. Wilson, you are full of surprises." He considered her for a long moment, then came to some internal decision. "Perhaps we can reach an accommodation that serves all parties." He turned to Jack. "Calloway, my offer for this land stands. Think on it while I'm gone." To Emma, he added, "As for you and your little ones, you'll remain here as our guests for the time being. Once I'm satisfied you're no threat to my interests, you'll be free to continue to Silverdale." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "With a generous escort, of course." "And if someone comes looking for us," Emma challenged, "you'll tell them you're waiting out the weather with your kind host," Mercer replied smoothly, "which happens to be the truth." He stood, adjusting his coat. "We'll return tomorrow to continue our discussion. Try anything foolish in the meantime, and our next conversation will be considerably less pleasant." He nodded to his men, who began filing toward the door. One remained behind, a burly man with a scar running through his left eyebrow. "Wade here will keep you company," Mercer explained. "For your protection, naturally." The remaining man smirked, taking up position near the door with his rifle across his knees. Mercer paused before leaving, his gaze sweeping the room one final time. "A word of advice, Mrs. Wilson," he said quietly. "Frontier justice is simple and swift. Choose your allegiances carefully." With that cryptic warning, he departed, the door closing firmly behind him. The sudden quiet felt oppressive. Wade watched them with bored hostility, occasionally picking at his teeth with a small knife. Jack remained kneeling on the floor, his bound hands surely causing pain by now. "May I tend to Mr. Calloway's injuries?" Emma asked Wade, her voice deliberately submissive. The man shrugged indifferently. "Do what you want. Just don't try nothing stupid." Emma placed the twins in their quilt nest, then moved to Jack's side. Gently, she examined the cut on his temple and split lip. "Head wounds always bleed dramatically," she murmured, loud enough for Wade to hear. "This isn't as bad as it looks." More softly, for Jack's ears alone, she whispered, "What do we do?" Jack's eyes flicked toward Wade, then back to Emma. "Play along," he breathed. "For now." She nodded imperceptibly, then addressed Wade directly. "I need clean water and cloths to dress these wounds." Wade considered the request, then nodded toward the kitchen pump. "Get it yourself, and don't try reaching for anything that ain't medical." Emma worked methodically, cleaning Jack's cuts and checking for other injuries. When she was certain Wade's attention had momentarily wandered to the window, she murmured, "The twins, and they're putting you in danger. I'm sorry." Jack shook his head minutely. "Been coming a long time. Water rights just an excuse. They want the Cherokee gone." His eyes met hers, intent and serious. "Listen carefully. When dark comes, Wade will want light. Lamp in the corner burns coal oil. Shelf above has bottle marked medicine, not medicine, understand?" Emma's eyes widened slightly as comprehension dawned. Some frontier households kept pure alcohol for medicinal purposes, highly flammable if exposed to flame. She gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "Can you untie me?" Jack asked, his voice normal volume again. Wade's attention snapped back. "Don't even think about it. His circulation is being cut off," Emma protested. "He'll lose his hands if—" "Not my problem," Wade interrupted flatly. "Boss said keep him tied." Emma pressed her lips together, but didn't argue further. Instead, she asked, "The twins need feeding and changing. May I have some privacy for that?" Wade snorted. "Lady, I got 3 kids of my own. Ain't nothing I haven't seen before." Nevertheless, he turned his chair slightly away, affording minimal privacy while maintaining his guard position. As darkness began falling outside, the atmosphere in the cabin grew increasingly tense. Wade lit the lamp Jack had indicated, casting long shadows across the room. Jack caught Emma's eye briefly, then glanced meaningfully at the shelf above. The rhythm of falling snow against the window panes created a deceptive sense of peace inside the cabin. Darkness had settled fully now, the single lamp casting flickering shadows that danced along the walls. Emma sat with the twins nestled against her chest, their small bodies warm and comforting despite the danger surrounding them. Jack remained on his knees, maintaining a facade of defeated resignation that Emma suspected was far from his true state of mind. Wade shifted uncomfortably in his chair, the tedium of guard duty clearly wearing on him. His eyelids drooped occasionally, before he'd jerk himself back to alertness with a scowl. The warmth of the cabin, compared to the bitter cold outside, made vigilance a challenge. "Need to check the fire," Jack said, breaking the prolonged silence. "Unless you want to freeze in the night." Wade considered this, then gestured with his rifle. "Go ahead, slow movements." With difficulty, Jack rose to his feet, his bound hands making the movement awkward. He made his way to the wood stove and awkwardly used a poker to shift the embers before adding another log. The flames leapt higher, illuminating his face with an orange glow that emphasized the determined set of his jaw. "Your boss won't let you harm the woman or children," Jack remarked conversationally as he worked. "Mercer's many things, but not the kind to have that on his conscience." Wade snorted. "Don't pretend to know Silas. Man's cold as Montana steel when his interests are threatened." "Maybe," Jack conceded, "but he's also practical, knows the difference between necessary action and trouble that brings unwanted attention." He straightened, facing Wade directly. 3 dead babies would bring every lawman from here to Helena, down on this valley." Emma tensed at Jack's directness, but kept her expression neutral as she gently rocked the twins. She recognized his strategy, gathering information, probing for weaknesses in their captor. Wade shifted uneasily. "Nobody's talking about hurting babies. That ain't our way." "Glad to hear it," Jack replied mildly. "Then we understand each other on that point, at least." A faint smile crossed Wade's face. "Don't think you're clever. Half-breed, I know what you're trying to do." Jack shrugged an impressive feat with his hands bound behind him. "Just passing the time. Night's gonna be long otherwise." He nodded toward the shelf above the lamp. "Got some whiskey up there, if you're interested. Might make the hours pass easier." Emma's pulse quickened as she recalled Jack's earlier hint about the medicine bottle. Their plan was taking shape, but they needed Wade to lower his guard further. Wade's eyes followed Jack's nod, lingering on the shelf with obvious interest. "What kind of whiskey?" "Kentucky bourbon, Uncle's special reserve, too good for ordinary occasions." Jack's tone turned confidential. "Only bring it out for significant moments. Figure having a gun pointed at me qualifies." The casual bravado in Jack's voice drew a reluctant chuckle from Wade. "You're an odd one, Calloway." He gestured with his rifle. "Sit back down first, then the lady can fetch it." Jack complied, settling on the floor with his back against the wall. Wade turned to Emma. "Just the whiskey, ma'am. No funny business." Emma nodded, gently placing the sleeping twins in their makeshift bed before rising. She moved with deliberate calm to the shelf, noting the position of the lamp below. The bottle Jack had indicated was dusty, its amber contents gleaming in the lamplight. Behind it stood a smaller, clear bottle with a handwritten label reading "Medicine" in faded ink. "Both bottles," Jack called casually. "One's for flavor, one's for effect. Uncle's special recipe." Wade frowned suspiciously. "Just the whiskey's fine." "Suit yourself," Jack replied with feigned indifference. "But you're missing out on the best drink west of the Mississippi." Wade's curiosity and boredom won out over caution. "Fine, both bottles, but you drink first." Emma carefully retrieved both bottles, her mind racing. Jack's plan required Wade to drink the alcohol, not them. She placed the bottles on the table, then reached for cups. "No need to be civilized," Wade said with a smirk. "Straight from the bottle's fine." Jack nodded to Emma. "Ladies first." A small sip from the bourbon to appreciate the flavor, followed by a touch of the clear to bring out the heat. Emma uncorked the bourbon, its rich aroma filling the space between them. She took a minimal sip, allowing just enough to wet her lips. The liquor burned pleasantly, warming her throat. With practiced composure from her nursing days, she masked her reaction. "Now the clear," Jack instructed, his eyes communicating more than his words. Emma understood immediately. She lifted the medicine bottle to her lips, but didn't actually drink, merely pretending to sip while keeping her lips firmly closed. She passed both bottles to Wade, who watched with growing interest. "Your turn," Emma said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Wade took the bourbon first, drinking deeply with the appreciation of a seasoned drinker. "Good stuff," he admitted, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Now the clear," Jack prompted. "Just a small amount after the bourbon. It's potent." Wade complied, taking a more cautious sip of the clear liquid. His eyes widened appreciatively. "Damn," he muttered. "That's got a kick." Jack nodded sagely. "Uncle's special ingredient. Trade secret." Over the next hour, Emma and Jack took turns, pretending to drink, while Wade consumed increasingly generous portions. The alcohol's effect became evident as Wade's posture relaxed, his eyelids growing heavier. Though he maintained his grip on the rifle, his vigilance waned noticeably. Jack caught Emma's eye, giving an almost imperceptible nod toward the lamp. The moment was approaching. She positioned herself closer to the twins, prepared to shield them if necessary. "Think I need to step outside for a moment?" Wade announced abruptly, the alcohol evidently affecting his bladder. "Door tends to stick in cold weather," Jack informed him casually. "Might need both hands to pull it closed again." Wade considered this information, eyeing Jack suspiciously despite his slightly unfocused gaze. After a moment's deliberation, he reached a decision influenced by both alcohol and practicality. "Turn around," he ordered Jack. "Lady, you too. Face the wall. Any sudden movements and I start shooting." They complied silently. Emma heard Wade approach Jack, followed by the sound of a knife being drawn. A moment later, Jack grunted softly, as Wade roughly cut the ropes binding his wrists. "Don't get ideas," Wade warned. "I'm stepping out for 1 minute. I'll try anything and your lady friend pays first." The threat was slightly slurred, but no less menacing. The door opened and closed as Wade stepped onto the porch. Jack immediately sprang into action, rubbing his wrists to restore circulation while moving swiftly toward Emma. "Now," he whispered urgently, "when he comes back in, I'll distract him. You need to spill the alcohol near the lamp and knock it over, understand?" Emma nodded, fear and determination warring within her. "The twins!" "I'll protect them," Jack assured her. "Be ready." The door handle rattled as Wade prepared to re-enter. Jack moved away from Emma, assuming a casual posture that belied his readiness. Wade stomped back inside, bringing a blast of cold air with him. "Much better," he mumbled, securing the door behind him. He turned to find Jack standing by the fire, warming his hands. "What did I say about moving?" Wade growled, raising his rifle. "Just getting feeling back in my fingers," Jack replied calmly. "Hard to drink properly with numb hands." He gestured toward the bottles on the table. "Speaking of which, shall we continue? Night's still young." Wade hesitated, suspicion warring with the allure of more alcohol. The bourbon was winning this internal battle when a sharp cry came from one of the twins. Lucas had awakened, his tiny face scrunching in discomfort. Emma moved instinctively toward her son. Wade swung his rifle in her direction. "Hold it. He needs changing," Emma said firmly, maternal concern overriding fear. "Unless you prefer the smell of soiled linens all night." Wade grimaced, lowering his rifle slightly. "Fine, make it quick." This unplanned disruption provided the diversion they needed. As Emma bent over the twins, ostensibly to check Lucas, Jack deliberately knocked into the table, sending the bottles wobbling. "Watch it!" Wade barked, momentarily distracted by the movement. In that crucial instant, Emma lunged forward, grabbing the medicine bottle and flinging its contents toward the lamp. The clear alcohol splashed across the table and onto the floor in a gleaming arc. Jack simultaneously charged Wade, driving his shoulder into the larger man's midsection. The rifle discharged with a deafening crack, the bullet embedding itself in the ceiling as the two men crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs. Emma kicked over the lamp in the same motion, sending glass shattering and flames erupting as the spilled alcohol ignited with a whoosh. Fire bloomed across the table and floor, creating an instant barrier between them and Wade. Jack landed a solid punch to Wade's jaw, but the larger man countered with a vicious elbow that caught Jack in the ribs. They rolled away from the spreading flames, locked in desperate combat. Emma snatched up both twins, clutching them to her chest as she retreated from the rapidly growing fire. The infants wailed in terror, their cries adding to the chaos. Smoke began filling the cabin, acrid and thick. "Emma, the door!" Jack shouted, still grappling with Wade. She rushed to the entrance, struggling to open it with her arms full of children. The wood had swollen in the cold, making the door stick just as Jack had warned Wade it might. She threw her shoulder against it repeatedly until it finally gave way, sending her stumbling onto the snow-covered porch. The frigid night air hit her like a physical blow after the cabin's warmth. She gasped, inhaling smoke-free air while scanning the surroundings frantically. No sign of Mercer's other men. They must have truly left until morning. The night was clear now, stars glittering coldly overhead while the ghostly landscape reflected. The cabin's growing inferno. Behind her, the sounds of struggle continued. A crash, followed by Jack's pain-filled grunt, propelled Emma to action. She couldn't go far with the twins in the bitter cold, but she could at least get them to safety. The barn stood 50 yards away, its dark bulk promising shelter. Clutching the twins tightly against her, Emma plunged into the snow. Her borrowed boots sank deep with each step, the powdery surface concealing treacherous depth beneath. The twins' cries diminished to whimpers as the cold shocked their systems. Emma murmured reassurances, though her words were lost to the wind. Halfway to the barn, the cabin door burst open again. Two figures tumbled out, still locked in combat. Jack and Wade rolled down the porch steps into the snow, neither relinquishing their hold on the other. Wade's superior size gave him advantage, but Jack fought with the desperation of a man protecting more than just himself. Emma reached the barn, fumbling with the latch using one hand while balancing the twins with the other. The wooden door finally swung open, revealing the welcoming darkness within. The familiar sense of hay and livestock enveloped her as she stepped inside. Several horses nickered softly in greeting, disturbed by the commotion. She quickly found a clean stall filled with fresh hay, placing the twins gently upon it. They continued whimpering, but the relative warmth of the barn compared to outside seemed to calm them slightly. Emma covered them with her shawl, tucking it securely around their tiny forms. "I'll be right back," she whispered, kissing each small forehead. "Mama promises." Returning to the barn door, Emma peered out at the continuing struggle. The cabin was now fully engulfed in flames, casting an orange glow across the snow-covered yard. The two men had separated, circling each other warily. Wade had lost his rifle in the chaos, but had drawn a wicked-looking hunting knife. Jack was unarmed, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. "You're dead, Calloway!" Wade snarled, lunging forward with the knife. Jack sidestepped, but not quickly enough. The blade sliced through his coat sleeve, drawing a fresh line of blood along his forearm. He stumbled backward, nearly losing his footing in the deep snow. Emma scanned the barn interior desperately, searching for anything that might serve as a weapon. Her gaze fell upon a pitchfork leaning against the wall. She seized it, its solid weight reassuring in her hands, and moved back toward the door. Outside, Wade pressed his advantage, forcing Jack backward with each thrust of his knife. "Silas was wrong about you," Wade taunted. "You ain't worth keeping alive. That land deed will be just as good with your name on it after you're dead." Jack's back was nearly against the burning cabin now, the heat intense enough to melt the snow around them. Sweat mingled with blood on his face as he searched for an escape route. Wade lunged again, the knife aimed directly at Jack's chest. In that moment, Emma burst from the barn, pitchfork extended before her like a lance. "Wade!" she shouted. The distraction was momentary but sufficient. Wade half-turned, his concentration broken. Jack seized the opportunity, grabbing Wade's knife arm and twisting violently. The larger man howled in pain as his wrist snapped with an audible crack. The knife dropped into the snow. Emma reached them just as Wade threw himself at Jack in blind rage. She swung the pitchfork, not aiming to kill, but to disable. The tines raked across Wade's back, tearing through his coat and drawing blood. He roared in pain, spinning toward this new threat. Jack used the moment to retrieve the fallen knife. "It's over, Wade," he called, his voice steady despite his injuries. "You're outmatched." Wade glanced between them, calculating his odds against two opponents. His broken wrist hung uselessly at his side, blood staining the snow beneath him. The fight in his eyes gradually gave way to grudging recognition of defeat. "Silas will kill you both for this," he spat, backing away. "And those brats too!" "He can try," Jack replied grimly, "but he'll have to find us first." Wade continued retreating toward the burning cabin, perhaps hoping to circle around to his horse. Jack advanced cautiously, keeping himself between Wade and Emma neither noticed the ominous cracking from the cabin's roof until it was too late. With a tremendous groan, the burning structure began to collapse. Wade glanced up, his eyes widening in horror as flaming timbers crashed down. He tried to leap clear, but his injured state slowed his reaction. A massive beam fell directly onto him, pinning him beneath its fiery weight. His scream cut through the night, primal and agonizing. Jack moved instinctively toward the fallen man, but the heat was too intense. The entire cabin was now a roaring inferno. Secondary collapses, sending showers of sparks skyward. Wade's screams continued briefly, then silenced with terrifying abruptness. Emma approached Jack, the pitchfork now hanging loosely in her grasp. "There was nothing you could do," she said softly, placing a hand on his arm. He nodded grimly, his expression haunted. "We need to move. That fire will be visible for miles. Mercer's men might return sooner than morning." The urgency of their situation snapped Emma back to practical concerns. The twins are in the barn. What now? Jack surveyed the burning homestead, his face illuminated by the flames. "We can't stay here. Once Mercer discovers what happened, he'll hunt us without mercy." He turned to Emma, his expression resolute. "There's an old trapper's cabin about 10 miles north. My uncle used it during hunting season. Few people know of it." 10 miles in this cold, with infants?" Emma asked, doubt creeping into her voice. "We have no choice," Jack replied grimly. "Penny can carry you and the twins. Thunder will manage with me, though it won't be comfortable." Emma nodded, acknowledging the truth of his assessment. "How long do we have before Mercer returns?" "If we're lucky, until dawn. If not," Jack glanced at the fire, which had now spread to a nearby shed. "The light might bring them sooner. We need to move fast." They returned to the barn, where the twins had fallen into exhausted sleep among the hay. Emma gathered them gently, while Jack prepared the horses, selecting the warmest blankets from the tack room to wrap around the infants. He worked methodically despite his injuries, prioritizing speed and necessity over comfort. "Take these," he said, handing Emma a pair of thick leather gloves and a fur-lined hat. "They were my uncle's, but they'll keep you warmer than what you have." Emma accepted the items gratefully. "Your arm needs bandaging." Jack glanced at the slash on his forearm, still seeping blood. "Later. Mercer's men are the more pressing concern." Nevertheless, Emma insisted on a quick field dressing, tearing strips from a clean blanket to bind the wound. Her nursing training enabled her to work swiftly, securing the makeshift bandage with efficient knots. "Thank you," Jack said simply when she finished. Outside, the cabin had collapsed entirely, reduced to a smoldering ruin that still cast substantial light across the snow. The destruction of Jack's home, the legacy of his uncle and years of his own labor, hung heavy between them, though neither spoke of it. Jack helped Emma mount Penny, carefully passing up the twins once she was settled. He had fashioned a sling, similar to the one Emma had created earlier, allowing her to carry both babies securely against her chest while still maintaining control of her horse. "Stay close behind me," Jack instructed as he mounted Thunder. "The trail is hidden by snow, but Thunder knows the way. If we get separated, keep heading north, following the ridgeline to your right." Emma nodded, drawing the borrowed hat lower over her ears. The night's bitter cold pierced through her layers of clothing, settling into her bones with insidious persistence. The twins, thankfully, remained asleep, their small bodies bundled so thoroughly that only their tiny faces remained visible. They set off into the vast whiteness, leaving behind the burning homestead. Jack led the way, Thunder breaking trail through snow that reached past his fetlocks in places. Penny followed gamely, her breath forming crystalline clouds in the frigid air. The only sounds were the crunch of hooves through snow and the distant crackling of the fire they'd left behind. The journey proved arduous from the start. What might have been an easy ride in good conditions became a grueling test of endurance. Snow concealed dips and rises in the terrain, causing the horses to stumble occasionally. Each time Penny faltered, Emma's heart leapt to her throat, terrified of falling with the precious burden secured to her chest. Jack remained vigilant, frequently turning to check on Emma and the twins. His own discomfort was evident in the stiff way he held himself, his injuries clearly paining him, though he made no complaint. Blood had seeped through the bandage on his arm, freezing into rusty crystals in the extreme cold. They traveled in silence for what seemed like hours, the unchanging landscape offering few markers of their progress. The stars wheeled overhead, brilliant and uncaring, while the moon cast blue-white light across the endless snow. Emma found herself slipping into a dangerous stupor, the monotonous motion and penetrating cold lulling her toward a sleep that could prove fatal. "Emma!" Jack's voice, low but insistent, jerked her back to alertness. He had dropped back to ride alongside her. "Talk to me. Tell me about Pennsylvania." She understood immediately what he was doing, keeping her engaged, preventing the dangerous surrender to cold-induced sleep. "It was green," she replied, her voice raspy from the cold. "So many trees. Our house was near a creek that sang all. Spring and summer." "What made you leave?" Jack prompted when she fell silent. Emma focused on forming coherent thoughts, pushing back against the numbing cold. "Thomas had a cousin who'd gone west, wrote letters about land for the taking, a place to build something of our own." A bitter laugh escaped her. "We were so naive." "Not naive," Jack corrected gently. "Hopeful. There's a difference." The sentiment echoed her own words to Thomas once, in what now seemed another lifetime. The memory warmed something within her that had nothing to do with physical temperature. "What about you?" Emma asked, turning the conversation to keep herself alert. "Your uncle raised you after your parents died." Jack nodded, his breath clouding around him. "Mother was Cherokee, father was Irish. Neither family approved much, but they made a good life together mining in Colorado. Fever took them both within days of each other when I was 12. His voice remained steady, the old grief tempered by time. "Uncle Nathaniel was my mother's brother, came all the way from Montana to collect me, taught me everything, ranching, hunting, Cherokee ways." "He sounds like a remarkable man," Emma observed. A small smile crossed Jack's face, visible even in the dim moonlight. He was. Stubborn as a mule and twice as opinionated, but wise in the ways that matter. The smile faded. He believed in living in harmony with this land, not conquering it. Said that was the fundamental difference between his people and the settlers. They lapsed into silence again, but a companionable one this time. The cold remained merciless, but the conversation had revived Emma's determination. She focused on the twins, drawing strength from their continued peaceful sleep against her chest. The terrain gradually became more challenging as they entered, foothills leading toward the mountains proper. Jack led them along game trails that wound between stands of pine and spruce, the trees offering occasional respite from the biting wind. Thunder picked his way confidently, despite the difficult conditions, living up to Jack's faith in the animal's instincts. "How much farther?" Emma asked when they paused to rest the horses in the shelter of a rocky outcropping. Jack studied the sky, gauging both time and direction. "Another hour, maybe less. We've made good progress." He dismounted stiffly, moving to check on the twins. "How are they holding up?" Emma shifted her position to reveal their small faces. Cold, but sleeping. Children this age can actually tolerate cold better than we might expect, as long as their heads and chests stay warm. Jack nodded, impressed by her knowledge. "Your nursing training?" "Partially," Emma acknowledged. "Also experience with my sister's children back home." She hesitated, then added softly, I never expected to be crossing a Montana mountain range with my own babies in the dead of winter. Life rarely follows our expectations, Jack replied, his expression thoughtful. For better or worse. The philosophical observation hung between them as Jack remounted Thunder. They continued their journey in silence, each lost in private thoughts, while remaining vigilantly aware of their surroundings. The cold seemed to intensify as the night deepened, even the horses' movements becoming more labored. Just when Emma began to fear they had somehow missed their destination, Jack raised, a hand pointing ahead. "There," he said, relief evident in his voice. At first, Emma could see nothing but more trees and snow. Then, as they drew closer, a small structure materialized among the pines, a simple log cabin nestled against the hillside, nearly invisible beneath its blanket of snow. No smoke rose from its chimney, no light shone from its single window, but its very presence represented salvation after their arduous journey. Jack dismounted quickly, moving to help Emma down from Penny. Her limbs had stiffened during the long ride, refusing to cooperate as she tried to swing her leg over. Jack's strong hands steadied her as she slid awkwardly from the saddle, the twins protesting the sudden movement with faint whimpers. "Let's get inside first," Jack suggested, supporting Emma as they trudged through knee-deep snow to the cabin, Dosha. "Then I'll see to the horses." The door was secured with a simple wooden latch, encrusted with ice that Jack broke away with the hilt of Wade's knife, now tucked in his own belt. The cabin's interior was freezing but blessedly still, the absence of wind, an immediate improvement over the conditions outside. Moonlight filtering through the single window revealed sparse furnishings, a small stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed frame with a straw mattress, and shelves containing various supplies. A layer of dust covered everything, evidence that the cabin had stood empty for some time. "It's not much," Jack acknowledged as he quickly assessed the space, "but it's defensible and unknown to Mercer." Emma nodded gratefully, too exhausted for words. She carefully unwrapped the twins, checking them for signs of frostbite or distress. To her immense relief, both seemed relatively unaffected by the journey, their extremities pink and warm when rubbed gently. "I'll get a fire started," Jack said, moving to the fireplace where a stack of split logs waited beside a bundle of kindling. "Then see to the horses. There's a lean-to shelter around back where they'll be protected from the wind." Emma settled on the edge of the bed, cradling the twins close to share her body heat. She watched as Jack efficiently built a fire, his movements practiced despite his injured arm. Within minutes, flames licked upward, casting dancing shadows across the cabin walls. The simple sight of fire, controlled this time, life-giving rather than destructive, brought tears to Emma's eyes. "It's not much," Jack repeated, misinterpreting her emotion as disappointment. "But we'll be safe here while we figure out our next steps." "It's perfect," Emma corrected softly. "Thank you." Something shifted in Jack's expression, a softening around his eyes, a slight easing of the tension in his jaw. He nodded once, acknowledging her gratitude without words, then slipped back outside to tend the horses. Left alone with the twins, Emma allowed herself a moment of raw emotion. The events of the past 24 hours crashed over her. The blizzard, their near death, Jack's rescue, Wade's attack, the burning ranch, their desperate flight through the frigid night. That they had survived at all seemed miraculous, yet survival was only the beginning. Mercer wouldn't simply forget them. By morning, he would discover the burned ranch and Wade's fate. His pursuit would be relentless, driven by both vengeance and self-preservation. The cabin might shield them temporarily, but for how long? The twins stirred against her, Lily's tiny hand escaping the blanket to catch a lock of Emma's hair. The simple, trusting gesture centered Emma, reminding her why. Retreat wasn't an option. These children, her children, deserved a future free from fear. Somehow she would find a way forward. When Jack returned, stamping snow from his boots, Emma had composed herself. "The horses?" she asked. "Settled and fed," he confirmed, moving. "To warm his hands by the growing fire. Found some grain stored in the lean-to. Uncle always kept this place stocked for emergencies." He glanced around the cabin with fresh eyes. Should be other supplies as well. Food, ammunition, maybe even some clothes. As the fire's warmth gradually permeated the small space, they took inventory of their resources. Jack discovered a cache of preserved foods in a root cellar accessed through a trapdoor in the floor. Jerky, dried fruits, beans, cornmeal, and coffee sealed in tins to protect from rodents. A water barrel collected runoff from the roof in warmer months. Now it held ice that could be melted as needed. Emma located medical supplies in a wooden chest, basic but functional items, including bandages, alcohol, needle and thread for suturing, and various dried herbs she recognized from her training. "Your uncle was prepared," she commented, impressed by the forethought. "Cherokee wisdom," Jack explained as he stoked the fire higher. "Always plan for the worst while hoping for the best." With the cabin gradually warming, Emma finally attended properly to Jack's injuries. The slash on his arm proved deeper than initially apparent, requiring careful cleaning and several stitches. Jack submitted to her ministrations stoically, flinching only slightly as the needle pierced his skin. "You have a steady hand," he observed as she tied off the final suture. "Necessity," Emma replied, applying a clean bandage. "A nervous nurse is worse than no nurse at all," my instructor used to say. Jack's numerous other injuries, bruises, abrasions, and a possibly cracked rib from his fight with Wade, received similar practical attention. Throughout it all, he remained silent, his eyes occasionally drifting to the twins, who now slept peacefully on the bed. "They're resilient," Jack said when Emma finished her work. "Like their mother." The simple observation carried weight beyond its words. Emma felt herself blushing slightly as she packed away the medical supplies. "We should all rest while we can," she suggested, changing the subject. "Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." Jack nodded agreement, rising stiffly from his chair. "I'll take the floor by the fire. You and the little ones have the bed." Emma started to protest this arrangement, aware of his injuries, but recognized the futility of arguing. Instead, she helped him create a makeshift pallet using spare blankets discovered in a trunk. The twins were already occupying the narrow bed, leaving little room for another adult in any case. As they settled into their respective sleeping places, the fire crackling softly in the background, Emma found herself strangely reluctant to end the day. Despite the danger and uncertainty surrounding them, something fundamental had shifted between herself and this man who had risked everything to save her family. "Jack," she said softly into the dimness, "what happens when Mercer comes looking?" There was a long pause before he answered. "We'll be ready," he replied simply. "Uncle chose this location carefully. One approach, easily defended, good sight lines, and I know these mountains better than Mercer ever will." The quiet confidence in his voice reassured Emma more than elaborate promises might have. She drew the blanket closer around herself and the twins, allowing exhaustion to finally claim her. Outside, the night deepened toward dawn. The moon set behind the western ridge, leaving only starlight to illuminate the snow-covered landscape. In the lean-to, the horses rested quietly, occasionally, shifting their weight or nickering softly to each other. And somewhere to the south, where a ranch house smoldered in ruins, riders were already gathering, hard-faced men with vengeance in their hearts, led by Silas Mercer, whose cold fury would accept nothing less than blood for blood. Dawn broke over the mountain ridge with deceptive serenity, painting the snow-covered landscape in hues of rose and gold. Inside the trapper's cabin, Emma woke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The twins stirred beside her, their small faces scrunched in early signs of hunger. Across the room, Jack already stood at the window, his silhouette etched against the growing light as he surveyed the terrain below. "Any sign?" Emma asked, her voice husky from sleep. Jack shook his head without turning. "Not yet, but they'll come." He spoke with the certainty of a man who understood the harsh realities of frontier justice. "We need to prepare while we can." Emma rose carefully, ensuring the twins remained bundled in the warm nest of blankets on the bed. The cabin had retained much of the previous night's warmth, though the fire had burned down to glowing embers. She moved to stoke it, adding kindling and small logs with practiced efficiency. "The horses?" she asked, practical concerns taking precedence over fear. "Fed and watered at first light," Jack replied, finally turning from the window. In the growing daylight, Emma could fully assess his condition. The cut above his eye had scabbed over, but dark bruises bloomed across his jawline. He moved stiffly, favoring his right side, where Wade's blows had likely cracked ribs. "Let me check your bandages," Emma said, already reaching for the medical. "Supplies!" Jack started to protest, but relented at her firm look. He sat by the fire, removing his shirt to reveal a torso mottled with bruises in various stages of development. Evidence that his confrontation with Wade wasn't the first physical altercation he'd endured recently. Emma worked silently, replacing the bandage on his arm and checking his ribs with gentle professional touches. "2 cracked, possibly 3, she diagnosed. "You're lucky none seem broken completely." Jack's mouth quirked in a humorless smile. "Wouldn't call any of this luck." "You're alive," Emma countered softly. "We all are. I'd call that fortunate at least." A soft cry from the bed interrupted their exchange. Lily had awakened fully now, her tiny fists waving in hungry protest. Lucas, as if on cue, joined his sister in demanding attention. "I'll prepare something for them," Jack offered, carefully pulling his shirt back on. Uncle kept goat's milk powder stored here, not ideal for infants, but it should sustain them. "Mixed with some melted snow." Emma nodded gratefully, gathering both twins into her arms. "They're resilient, but they won't last much longer without proper nourishment." While Jack worked at the crude stove, mixing powdered milk with warmed water, Emma changed the twins, using scraps of clean fabric she'd found in the cabin storage chest. Despite their ordeal, both babies seemed remarkably hardy, their skin warm and their eyes alert. "You've done well with them," Jack observed as he handed Emma a cup of the reconstituted milk. "Many wouldn't have survived what they've endured." "I had help," Emma replied simply, meeting his gaze with a wealth of unspoken gratitude. They shared a sparse breakfast of jerky and dried apples, conserving their limited supplies while discussing their situation with clear-eyed pragmatism. "Mercer will track us to the burned ranch by mid-morning," Jack reasoned. "Once he finds Wade..." He left the sentence unfinished, but its implication hung in the air between them. Wade's death would transform their pursuit from a matter of business to one of blood vengeance. "How many men does he have?" Emma asked, adjusting Lucas in her arms as she fed him small spoonfuls of milk. 5, maybe 6 counting Wade, Jack answered. "All experienced trackers. They'll find the trail we left despite the snow." Emma absorbed this information with remarkable composure. "Then we can't stay here." Jack nodded agreement. "This cabin buys us time, nothing more. We need to reach Silverdale. That's still our best hope." "Silverdale's at least 3 days. Ride in these conditions," Emma calculated, "assuming we could even find the trail." "Not Silverdale directly," Jack clarified. "There's an army outpost about 20 miles east of here at Eagle Pass. Captain Reynolds commands it, a fair man, who's had his own run-ins with Mercer's outfit. If we can reach the outpost, we'd find protection and a way to send word to your sister." Hope flickered within Emma at this new information, though she tempered it with realism. 20 miles through these mountains in winter, with twin infants, With Mercer's men behind us, Jack added grimly. But yes, that's our path. Their discussion of specifics was interrupted by a sound that froze them both, the distant but unmistakable report of a rifle, followed by another. Jack moved swiftly to the window, his body tense with alertness. Hunting, he determined after a moment of observation. Not close, but closer than I'd like. Mercer's men sending signals to each other. They've found our trail, Emma concluded. Jack didn't contradict her. We need to move now. Their preparation was swift and methodical, born of necessity rather than panic. Jack gathered weapons, his rifle, Wade's knife, and a revolver discovered among the cabin's supplies. Emma prepared the twins for travel, wrapping them in multiple layers before securing them in an improvised carrier fashioned from a deer hide. And rope. Wear these, Jack instructed, handing Emma a pair of crude snowshoes crafted from bent maple and rawhide. They'll distribute your weight, make you faster. Emma examined the unfamiliar contraptions doubtfully. I've never used anything like these. Keep your stride wide, your weight centered, Jack demonstrated briefly. You'll learn quickly enough when your survival depends on it. Outside, the morning had matured into a brilliant winter day. The sky an impossible blue against the pristine white landscape. Under different circumstances, Emma might have found it breathtaking. Now, the unbroken expanse of snow represented only the challenge that lay ahead. Jack had already saddled the horses, though he explained they would lead rather than ride them. Initially, less visible that way, he reasoned, and the horses can break trail through the deeper snow. Before departing, Jack took one final precaution. He scattered the cabin's remaining supplies, overturned furniture, and removed any indication of which direction they intended to travel. To casual observation, it would appear they had fled in haste, without clear purpose. A small deception, he explained, but it might buy us precious time. With the twins secured against Emma's chest, they set out eastward toward Eagle Pass. Jack led the way with Thunder in tow, forging a path through snow that often reached above his knees. Emma followed, awkwardly at first on the snowshoes, leading Penny. The morning stillness enveloped them, broken only by the rhythmic crunch of snow beneath their feet and the occasional soft nickering of the horses. The first hour passed without incident as they navigated through stands of pine and across small clearings. Jack maintained a punishing pace despite his injuries, stopping only briefly to check their back trail or consult landmarks visible only to his experienced eye. Emma struggled to keep up. The combination of snowshoes, the twins' weight, and Penny's reluctant progress taxing her endurance. "How are you holding up?" Jack asked during one brief pause, concern evident in his expression. Emma straightened her shoulders, refusing to become a liability. "We're managing." Jack studied her for a moment, then nodded approvingly. "You're stronger than you realize." The simple affirmation fortified Emma more than rest could have. They pressed onward, climbing steadily as the terrain grew more challenging. The occasional rifle shots continued behind them, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away, but always a reminder of the danger at their heels. By midday, the forest thinned as they approached a ridge that offered their first clear view of the valley they had left behind. Jack motioned Emma to remain under cover while he crawled forward to survey their back trail. 6 riders, he reported upon returning, his expression grim. "About 3 miles back, following our tracks exactly as I feared." "How much time do we have?" Emma asked, adjusting the twins, who had remarkably remained calm throughout the morning's journey. Jack considered. "At their pace, they'll reach the cabin by early afternoon. After that," he shrugged, "depends how long my misdirection holds them." They continued their arduous trek, now descending from the ridge into a narrow valley bordered by steep slopes. Here, Jack finally suggested mounting the horses to make better time across the relatively even terrain. He helped Emma onto Penny, ensuring the twins remained secure in their carrier. Eagle Pass lies beyond that eastern ridge, Jack explained, pointing to a distant mountain silhouette. If we push hard, we might reach the approach by nightfall. Emma nodded, too focused on their immediate survival to consider the implications of might. The twins had begun fussing, hungry again despite the morning's feeding. She soothed them as best she could while keeping pace with Jack's steady progress. They were halfway across the valley when disaster struck. Penny stumbled suddenly, her front leg plunging through what appeared to be solid ground but was actually a snow-covered stream. The horse whinnied in panic, nearly unseating Emma as she fought to regain her footing. Jack dismounted instantly, rushing to steady Penny before she could throw Emma and the twins. "Easy, girl," he murmured, gentling the frightened animal while assessing the situation. When Penny finally calmed, the extent of their predicament became clear. The horse had wrenched her leg badly in the fall, a swelling already visible above. The fetlock. Though no bones appeared broken, Penny limped noticeably when Jack carefully led her from the stream. "She can't continue carrying weight," Jack concluded after a thorough examination. "Not if we want her to reach Eagle Pass at all." Emma felt a sinking sensation as she realized the implications. "We'll have to abandon her." "No." Jack shook his head firmly. "We leave no one behind, but it means Thunder carries the twins and supplies, you and I walk, and our pace slows considerably. The adjustment required redistributing their limited supplies and fashioning a new carrier for the twins that could be secured to Thunder's saddle." Jack worked quickly, his hands sure despite the cold and his own injuries. Emma attended to the twins, feeding them the last of the prepared milk while trying not to calculate how long it would be before they needed more. "Your ribs," Emma observed, as Jack lifted a heavy pack. "The strain will worsen them." Jack dismissed her concern with a shake of his head. "We adapt or we die out here. Simple as that." Their progress indeed slowed after resuming their journey. Penny limped gamely behind, them no longer breaking trail, but at least able to follow. Jack now took the brunt of the physical labor, forging a path through increasingly dense snowdrifts, while Emma walked beside Thunder, one hand constantly checking on the twins. The afternoon waned, shadows lengthening across the pristine landscape. As the sun descended toward the western mountains, temperature dropped noticeably, the relative warmth of midday surrendering to winter's harsher embrace. Emma's breaths formed crystalline clouds before her face, while frost gathered on Jack's beard and eyebrows. They had just begun ascending the eastern ridge when the sound they dreaded most reached their ears, the distant but unmistakable baying of hounds. "Tracking dogs," Jack confirmed grimly. "Mercer must have brought them from Pine Creek." "How?" Emma asked, unable to mask her dismay. "How could they have caught up so quickly?" "My misdirection failed," Jack concluded, his expression hardening. "Or they split their forces to cover multiple possibilities." He glanced at the sun's position, then at the difficult terrain ahead. "We won't reach Eagle Pass before dark. Not now." The unspoken question hung between them. What alternative remained? Jack surveyed their surroundings with the focused intensity of a man whose survival had often depended on such assessments. "There," he decided finally, pointing to a rocky outcropping about half a mile up the ridge. "Defensible position, good visibility. We'll make our stand there, if necessary." Emma swallowed hard, recognizing that making a stand meant potential combat. Her gaze dropped to the twins, now sleeping fitfully in their carrier on Thunder's back. What future awaited these innocent children if the worst occurred? "We'll reach that position before deciding our next move," Jack added, correctly reading her thoughts. "Nothing's certain yet." They pushed forward with renewed urgency, the baying of the hounds providing motivation beyond mere words. The slope grew steeper, the snow deeper in places where wind had created massive drifts. Jack broke trail relentlessly, occasionally extending a hand to help Emma through particularly challenging sections. The sun touched the western peaks, casting long purple shadows across the snow when they finally reached the outcropping Jack had identified. It formed a natural semicircle of stone rising from the mountainside, offering protection on three sides while providing clear visibility down the slope they had just ascended. Jack wasted no time establishing their position. He secured the horses in the most sheltered section of the outcropping, then unloaded the twins and essential supplies. Emma created a protected space for the infants using packs and saddle blankets, ensuring they remained warm despite the rapidly dropping temperature. No fire, Jack decided reluctantly. Too visible. Emma nodded, understanding, though the prospect of enduring the mountain night without warmth was daunting. She busied herself, preparing cold rations while Jack organized their meager weapons and surveyed the terrain below through the fading light. "I count 4 riders," he reported, passing the spyglass to Emma. "Maybe 5. They've stopped where Penny broke through the ice." Emma peered through the glass, her heart constricting at the sight of distant figures gathered in the valley below. Even from this distance, their purposeful movements conveyed deadly intent. "Will the dogs track us all the way here?" she asked, returning the spyglass. "Eventually," Jack confirmed, "but darkness works in our favor. Difficult to follow a trail at night, even with hounds." As if to contradict his assessment, the baying resumed, closer now, and with an eager note that suggested the dogs had regained their scent. Jack's expression remained composed, but Emma saw his hand tighten around the rifle. "You should take Thunder and continue to Eagle Pass," he suggested suddenly. "The trail's relatively clear from here. Keep the North Star on your right shoulder. You could reach the outpost by morning." Emma stared at him, understanding immediately what he was proposing. "While you stay and hold them off." It wasn't a question. Jack met her gaze steadily. "One rider moving fast stands a better chance than all of us moving slowly. The twins deserve that chance." "And you deserve to be abandoned to die?" Emma challenged, unexpected anger flaring within her. "After everything you've sacrificed already?" A complicated emotion crossed Jack's features, surprise mingled with something deeper. "My life against 3 others is simple arithmetic, Emma." "Nothing about this is simple," she countered fiercely. "We've survived this far together. We'll continue together or not at all." The twins chose that moment to awaken. They're hungry. Cries piercing the gathering darkness. The sound seemed to settle something in Jack's expression. He nodded once, accepting Emma's decision without further argument. "Then we prepare for whatever comes," he stated simply. They worked quickly in the fading light, Jack positioning loose rocks to create additional cover, while Emma prepared the last of their milk powder for the twins. The temperature continued, dropping precipitously as full darkness enveloped the mountain. Stars emerged in brilliant profusion overhead, beautiful and indifferent to the human drama unfolding beneath them. The dogs' baying grew intermittently closer, then receded, suggesting their pursuers were having difficulty maintaining the trail in darkness. Each time the sounds faded, hope flickered briefly. Each time they resumed closer than before, that hope diminished. Emma huddled with the twins, sharing her body warmth while watching Jack maintain his vigilant guard. His silhouette against the starlit snow struck her as strangely magnificent. A man standing against forces that would have broken many others, not for his own survival, but for people who had entered his life just days ago. "Why did you do it?" she asked softly, the question that had lingered unspoken between them. "Take such risks for strangers?" Jack remained silent so long that Emma thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the quiet certainty of a man who had considered his motivations thoroughly. When my family died, my Sarah and Hannah, I was driving cattle to Fort Benton. Springtime, rivers high from snowmelt. He paused, his gaze fixed on the distant darkness. Quickest route home was across Blackwater River. Local folks warned me it was too dangerous. I was stubborn, determined to reach Sarah and Hannah faster. Emma listened, sensing the importance of this confession. Halfway across, the current took me. Horse panicked, threw me, nearly drowned before a Blackfoot hunter pulled me out. Jack's voice remained steady, though emotion underscored each word. Delayed me 3 days. By the time I reached our cabin, smallpox had already... He didn't complete the sentence. "I'm so sorry," Emma whispered. Jack acknowledged her sympathy, with a slight nod. "For 8 years, I've wondered what might have happened if I'd been there, if I could have gotten them to a doctor sooner, or at least..." He swallowed hard. "At least not left them to face it alone." Understanding dawned on Emma. "So when you found us in the blizzard..." "I saw a chance to make a different choice," Jack confirmed, "to not ride past someone who needed help, regardless of risk." A humorless smile touched his lips. "My uncle would say the Creator sometimes offers us chances to heal old wounds by facing similar trials with new wisdom." The naked vulnerability in this admission touched Emma deeply. Before she could respond, however, a new sound interrupted their conversation. Horses approaching from below, much closer than expected. Jack tensed instantly, raising his rifle. "They're coming up the main trail. Must have lost our tracks, but guessed our general direction." Emma clutched the twins tighter, fear and determination warring within her. "What do we do?" "Stay absolutely silent," Jack instructed, his voice barely audible. "They may pass below without spotting us if we're lucky." Luck, it seemed, had abandoned them entirely. Within minutes, flickering torchlight became visible on the trail below their position. The dogs had fallen silent, suggesting they were now being led rather than following a scent. 5 riders materialized from the darkness, their progress deliberate rather than rushed. "They know we're near," Jack whispered. "They're searching methodically rather than following a specific trail." From their elevated position, Emma could make out the figures clearly in the torchlight. Silas Mercer led the group, his tall form unmistakable even at this distance. The other men fanned out slightly, scanning the slopes as they ascended. 2 large hounds padded alongside, occasionally sniffing at the ground, before looking expectantly at their handlers. Jack pulled back from the edge, motioning Emma deeper into the outcropping's shelter. "If they continue on the main trail, they might miss us entirely," he breathed, hope and doubt mingling in his tone. For several agonizing minutes, it appeared this might prove true. The riders continued upward, following the most obvious path rather than deviating toward the outcropping. Emma allowed herself to breathe slightly easier until one of the twins, perhaps sensing her tension, let out a piercing wail. The sound carried clearly in the still night air. Below, the riders halted instantly. One of the dogs raised its head, ears pricked forward, then gave an eager bark. Mercer gestured sharply, redirecting his men toward the source of the sound. "So much for remaining undetected," Jack muttered, moving swiftly to defensive position. "Stay back with the twins. I'll handle this." Emma complied, retreating to where the horses stood while trying to quiet Lucas, whose initial cry had now infected his sister with similar distress. Both twins wailed disconsolately, their timing as catastrophic as it was understandable. Jack knelt at the outcropping's edge, rifle ready as torchlight approached their position. When the riders were approximately 50 yards below, he called out with commanding authority, "That's far enough, Mercer." The riders halted, torches illuminating surprised faces as they located Jack's position above them. Mercer recovered quickly, a cold smile spreading across his features. "Calloway," he acknowledged, "was beginning to think you'd given us the slip." "Turn back," Jack replied evenly. "You've got no quarrel with the woman and children." Mercer laughed without humor. "No quarrel? Your woman killed Wade, burned my property that was stored in your barn. I'd call that considerable quarrel." "Your property?" Jack challenged. "You mean stolen cattle and contraband whiskey?" Mercer's expression hardened. "Legal distinctions matter little out here, as you well know." He gestured expansively. "Look around you, Calloway. 5 of us, 2 of you, 1 a woman with infants. Night's getting colder. You're trapped on this mountain with no supplies, no reinforcements coming." His voice took on a reasonable tone. "Surrender now. We'll make it quick. Keep resisting. Those babies will freeze before dawn." The calculated cruelty of the ultimatum chilled Emma more thoroughly than the winter night. Jack remained outwardly impassive, though she could detect the tension in his shoulders. "Here's my counter-offer," Jack responded, his rifle unwavering. "You turn around, ride back to whatever hole you crawled from, and I don't put a bullet through your skull right now." One of Mercer's men shifted nervously, but Mercer himself merely chuckled. "Bold talk for a man out of options." He nodded to his companions. "Spread out. Approach from multiple sides." "The half-breed can't watch all directions at once." The men began moving as instructed, circling to flank the outcropping. Jack fired a warning shot that kicked up snow inches from Mercer's horse, causing the animal to rear in alarm. "Next one. Won't miss," Jack promised, his voice deadly calm. Mercer regained control of his mount, his earlier amusement replaced by cold fury. "Kill him," he ordered his men. "The woman and brats we take alive." What followed was a nightmare of noise and chaos. Rifles cracked from multiple positions, bullets whining off stone as Jack returned fire with precision, born of desperate necessity. Emma huddled with the twins behind the natural barricade, her heart pounding so violently she feared it might burst from her chest. Thunder and Penny stamped nervously at each gunshot, their eyes rolling in terror. Emma soothed them as best she could while keeping the twins protected, acutely aware that a panicking horse could trample them all in the confined space. Jack maintained a disciplined defense, conserving ammunition with carefully placed shots. His strategy became apparent to Emma. He couldn't hope to kill all their attackers, but he could make the assault costly enough to force a retreat. One of Mercer's men cried out in pain, suggesting at least 1 bullet had found its mark. "Calloway!" Mercer shouted during a momentary lull in the firing. "Last chance! Surrender the woman and children. You might still walk away from this." "You know that's a lie, Mercer," Jack called back, quickly reloading his rifle. "The moment we surrender, we're all dead." The twins' crying had reached a fever pitch, their small bodies trembling with cold and fear. Emma's attempts to console them proved futile against the terrifying sounds surrounding them. In that moment of desperation, inspiration struck. "Jack," she hissed urgently. "The dogs, they're tracking by sound now, not scent." He glanced back, frowning in confusion. "If I take the twins and Thunder in one direction while you create a diversion in another," Emma explained, the dangerous plan forming even as she spoke it. Understanding dawned in Jack's eyes, followed immediately by concern. "Too risky. These men aren't just trackers, they're killers." "And we're already trapped," Emma countered. "This way, at least the twins have a chance." She met his gaze steadily. "You said Eagle Pass lies directly east. I can find it." Another volley of gunfire interrupted their exchange, forcing Jack back to his defensive position. When he spoke, again, his voice carried reluctant acceptance. "Due east, following the ridge line. Look for signal fires on the outpost perimeter." He hesitated, then added softly, "I'll buy you as much time as I can." The simple promise contained volumes of unspoken meaning. Emma swallowed against the sudden tightness in her throat. "We'll send help." Jack nodded once, his expression conveying what words could not. Then, practical to the last, he handed her Wade's knife and his own revolver. 6 shots. Use them only if absolutely necessary. With methodical efficiency born of their shared danger, they prepared for their desperate gambit. Emma secured the twins to Thunder's saddle using a modified version of their earlier carrier, ensuring they were protected from the cold while still able to breathe freely. Jack gave her most of their remaining supplies and his heavy coat despite her protests. "Now," he whispered, as a momentary silence fell over the standoff, "I'll draw their fire northward. Give me 2 minutes before you head east." Emma nodded, unable to find adequate words for what might be their final parting. Impulsively, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a brief, fierce kiss that conveyed gratitude, respect, and possibilities that might never be realized. Jack appeared momentarily stunned, then returned the gesture with equal intensity. When they separated, his eyes held a new determination. "Find Captain Reynolds, tell him everything." With that, he turned away, reloading his rifle with deliberate movements. Emma led Thunder toward the eastern edge of the outcropping, her heart pounding with fear and resolve. Behind her, Jack prepared for his most dangerous performance. When Jack finally made his move, it came with dramatic conviction. He fired several rapid shots toward Mercer's position, then called out with deliberate loudness, "Emma, take Penny north along the tree line. I'll cover you." Immediately afterward, he dashed from the outcropping in the opposite direction, firing as he ran. The diversion worked precisely as intended. Mercer's men redirected their attention toward Jack's fleeing figure, torches and gunfire following, his path away from Emma's actual escape route. Emma wasted no precious second of the diversion. She led Thunder eastward, moving as quickly and quietly as the terrain allowed. The twins, miraculously, had fallen silent, perhaps exhausted by their earlier crying. Penny remained behind at the outcropping. Her injury would only slow their escape, and her presence might reinforce the illusion that all of them had fled with Jack. The sounds of pursuit faded behind her as Emma pushed forward into the darkness. Guided only by starlight and the vague outline of the ridge against the night sky, Thunder followed trustingly, his extraordinary stamina evident in his steady progress despite the challenging terrain. Emma refused to consider what might be happening. To Jack, such thoughts would only paralyze her with grief and fear when action was essential. Instead, she focused entirely on the path ahead, on each step that carried her twins farther from danger. The night deepened around them, the cold intensifying until it seemed to crystallize the very air. Emma's breaths came in painful gasps, her muscles screaming in protest at the continued exertion after days of hardship. Only the knowledge that stopping meant death kept her moving forward, one agonizing step after another. Occasional gunfire still echoed from the north, suggesting Jack continued to lead their pursuers away. Each distant shot simultaneously relieved and terrified Emma. Relief that Jack still lived, terror that each report might be his last. Time lost meaning in the monotony of struggle against snow, slope, and exhaustion. The eastern horizon showed no sign of the outpost fires Jack had mentioned. Had she veered off course? Walked past the outpost in the darkness? The questions tormented her as doubts multiplied with each passing hour. When Emma finally stumbled, falling to her knees in snow that reached her waist, she wasn't certain she could rise again. Every muscle trembled with fatigue, her hands and feet numb beyond feeling. Behind her, Thunder whinnied softly, nudging her shoulder with his muzzle as if urging her onward. "I can't," she whispered, the admission torn from her unwillingly. "I can't go any further." As if in answer to her despair, one of the twins, Lily, began to stir, her small sounds neither crying nor babbling, but simply a reminder of life continuing, demanding protection and care. Emma closed her eyes, gathering the last remnants of her strength. "For you," she murmured to her children, "always for you." She forced herself upright, leaning against Thunder for support as she regained her footing. One more step, then another, each movement a victory against nature's indifference and her body's limitations. When Emma crested the next rise, her heart nearly stopped. There in the distance, so faint she feared it might be hallucination, flickered what appeared to be firelight. Not the random pattern of forest fires, but the deliberate placement of watchfires forming a perimeter, Eagle Pass outpost. Renewed energy surged through Emma's exhausted frame. "We're going to make it," she told the twins, her voice cracking with emotion. "We're almost there." Her pace quickened despite the deepening snow, thunder matching her newfound determination. The fires grew gradually larger, confirming they were indeed approaching the outpost. Emma began to distinguish individual structures within the firelight's glow, buildings, corrals, the distinctive shape of a flagpole. She was within half a mile of the perimeter when a sharp voice called from the darkness, "Halt and identify yourself." Emma froze, sudden fear replacing relief. Was this a military sentry or one of Mercer's men who had somehow circled ahead? "I said identify yourself," the voice repeated, harsher now. The unmistakable sound of a rifle being cocked accompanied the demand. "Emma Wilson," she called back, fighting to keep her voice steady, with infant twins, seeking Captain Reynolds for protection. A long silence followed her declaration. Then, cautiously, a lantern was raised, illuminating a blue uniformed soldier approaching on horseback. The young cavalry trooper regarded Emma with astonishment, taking in her frost-covered form, the horse with its precious burden, and the evident distress of their condition. "Ma'am," he managed finally, lowering his rifle. "What in God's name are you doing out here in the dead of night?" Emma nearly collapsed with relief at the confirmation that she had indeed reached military protection. "Fleeing Silas Mercer and his men," she explained rapidly. "They've been pursuing us since yesterday. A man named Jack Calloway is still out there, drawing them away to allow our escape." The soldier's expression shifted to alert concern at Mercer's name. Mercer's gang operating in this sector. He turned in his saddle, whistling sharply to summon another trooper from a nearby position. "Jenkins, escort this woman and children to the captain immediately. I'll alert the watch." Within minutes, Emma found herself surrounded by soldiers who moved with efficient urgency, helping her onto a military mount while carefully transferring the twins to blanket-lined boxes normally used for ammunition. Thunder was led away to the cavalry stables, his extraordinary service acknowledged by gentle handling. The outpost itself proved larger than Emma had anticipated, a substantial installation with multiple buildings arranged around a central parade ground. Lamplight shone from several windows despite the late hour, suggesting the night watch was well established. Emma was brought directly to the largest structure, where a broad-shouldered man with a silver-streaked beard emerged to meet them. Captain Reynolds, she presumed correctly, took one look at her condition and began issuing rapid orders. "Get the infirmary prepared. Hot water, blankets, medical supplies." He turned to another soldier. "Lieutenant Hayes, organize 2 patrols immediately. Full complement, armed for engagement." To Emma, he added more gently, "Let's get you and those little ones inside, Mrs. Wilson. Then you can tell me everything." The warmth of the captain's office enveloped Emma like a physical embrace as she was guided inside. For the first time in what seemed an eternity, true safety surrounded her. The twins were carefully examined by the outpost's medical officer, while Emma herself was provided hot tea, blankets, and solicitous attention. Only when basic comforts had been seen to did Captain Reynolds settle across from her, his expression grave but kind. "Now, Mrs. Wilson, start from the beginning and tell me exactly where I can find Jack Calloway." Captain Reynolds absorbed Emma's account with the focused attention of a man accustomed to evaluating life-or-death situations. His weathered face remained impassive, though his eyes flickered with recognition at certain details, particularly those involving Silas Mercer. "Mercer's outfit has been a thorn in our side for months," he confirmed when Emma finished. Cattle rustling, intimidation, even suspicion of murder, though nothing we could prove in a territorial court. He stroked his silver-streaked beard thoughtfully. But attacking a woman with infants, burning homesteads, that crosses lines even by frontier standards. And Jack? Emma pressed, unable to keep anxiety from her voice. Your men will find him? The captain's expression softened slightly. Lieutenant Hayes leads our best trackers. If Calloway's still out there, they'll find him. He didn't add the obvious qualifier, if Jack was still alive. Dawn was breaking, pale light filtering through the office windows when Lieutenant Hayes himself appeared at the door, his uniform dusted with snow and his expression grave. Captain, he acknowledged with a quick salute, we've located Calloway. Emma stood so abruptly that her chair toppled backward. Is he alive, ma'am? Hayes confirmed quickly, though in rough condition. We found him about 4 miles north of the position you described. Apparently, he led Mercer's men on quite a chase before taking cover in a ravine. Mercer's men? Captain Reynolds inquired. 2 dead from accurate rifle fire, Hayes reported clinically. The others, including Mercer himself, fled when they spotted our patrol approaching. We're tracking them now. Relief made Emma's knees weak. She sank back onto her righted chair, tears threatening despite her attempt at composure. When will you bring him here? The medical wagon is already en route, ma'am. Should arrive within the hour. That hour stretched endlessly for Emma. She divided her attention between the sleeping twins, now clean and properly fed in the infirmary, and the outpost's main gate where the medical wagon would appear. Captain Reynolds had kindly provided her with fresh clothing, spare uniform parts adapted to fit her smaller frame, and proper meals that reminded her body what normal sustenance felt like. When the wagon finally appeared, Emma rushed across, the parade ground heedless of protocol or propriety. Jack lay on a stretcher, his face alarmingly pale beneath a layer of dirt and blood. His right leg was splintered, and bandages wrapped his torso over what appeared to be fresh gunshot wounds. Emma, he murmured as she approached, his voice weak but unmistakably relieved. The twins. Safe, she assured him, taking his cold hand between her warm ones. Thanks to you. A ghost of his characteristic half-smile crossed Jack's face before pain reasserted itself. The army medic supervising his transport interjected firmly, He needs immediate attention, ma'am. Multiple wounds, exposure, probable pneumonia setting in. Emma didn't relinquish Jack's hand as they moved him to the infirmary. Her nursing training immediately recognized the seriousness of his condition, the shallow breathing, the unnatural heat, now replacing his earlier coldness, the blue tinge to his lips that suggested compromised circulation. "I'll help," she informed. The outpost's doctor, not as a request, but a statement of fact. The physician, an older man named Simmons with kind eyes and capable hands, assessed her briefly before nodding acceptance. What followed was a desperate battle not against Mercer's, but against the more implacable enemies of infection, blood loss, and hypothermia. Jack had sustained 2 gunshot wounds, one grazing his side, another more serious one through his thigh, plus a broken ankle from a fall during his flight. Most concerning, however, was the developing pneumonia, his lungs filling with fluid. After hours of exertion in freezing conditions, Emma worked alongside Dr. Simmons with focused intensity, drawing on every aspect of her training. When not directly assisting with Jack's care, she attended to her twins, often carrying one or both infants in a sling while preparing medicinal teas or changing bandages. "You're quite remarkable, Mrs. Wilson," Dr. Simmons commented on the 3rd day as they monitored Jack's fitful sleep. "Most people would have collapsed after enduring what you've been through." Emma shook her head dismissively. "I've done what anyone would do to protect their children." "Not anyone," the doctor corrected gently. "And certainly not with such incompetence under pressure." He nodded toward Jack's sleeping form. "He's fortunate to have you advocating for him. The army isn't always accommodating toward men of mixed heritage." The delicate reference to Jack's Cherokee blood wasn't lost on Emma. She had noticed the subtle differences in how some soldiers addressed or referred to Jack, the slight hesitations or carefully neutral tones. Captain Reynolds, to his credit, showed no such prejudice, visiting daily to check on Jack's condition and update them on the continuing pursuit of Mercer. "Any man who risks his life to save a woman and children deserves respect regardless of heritage," Emma stated firmly. Dr. Simmons smiled approvingly. "A perspective I share, Mrs. Wilson. One wishes it were more universal." On the fifth day, Jack's fever finally broke. Emma was dozing in a chair beside his bed, Lily nestled against her chest when his hoarse voice woke her. "This is becoming a habit," he observed weakly. "You tending my wounds." Joy surged through Emma as she leaned forward, careful not to disturb the sleeping infant. "A habit I'd gladly break if you'd stop collecting injuries," she returned, matching his attempt at lightness while blinking back tears of relief. Jack's eyes, though sunken with illness, held newfound clarity as they focused on Lily's tiny form. "The little ones are thriving." "Children are remarkably resilient," Emma confirmed, "more so than stubborn men who push themselves beyond all reason." A hint of Jack's familiar half-smile appeared. "Pot calling the kettle black, Mrs. Wilson? Seems I recall a certain stubborn woman trudging through a blizzard with twin infants rather than sensibly remaining in a trading post." The gentle teasing reassured Emma more than any medical symptom. The Jack was truly on the mend. She adjusted Lily more comfortably against her shoulder and reached for Jack's hand. "I never properly thanked you." "No need," he dismissed, though his fingers curled around hers. "Any decent person would have—" "Stop!" Emma interrupted firmly. "We both know that's not true. Most decent people would have ridden past us in that storm, assuming intervention meant certain death for everyone." Her voice softened. "You gave us a chance when no one else would, and then gave everything else protecting us." Uncharacteristic emotion flickered across Jack's features before he mastered it. "Seems to me we protected each other," he replied simply. Their quiet moment was interrupted by Captain Reynolds striding into the infirmary, his expression more animated than usual. "Calloway, good to see you rejoining the land of the living." Jack attempted to sit straighter, an ingrained response to authority that his weakened condition thwarted. "Captain," he acknowledged. "Any news of Mercer?" Reynolds' face darkened. "The man himself continues to elude us, though we've captured 2 more of his gang. They're eager to testify against their former boss in exchange for leniency." He shifted topics with military briskness. "That's not why I'm here, however. 2 important communications arrived by telegraph." He turned to Emma. "First, Mrs. Wilson, we reached your sister in Silverdale. She and her husband are understandably relieved to learn of your safety and will arrange transportation as soon as the mountain passes clear enough for travel." Emma nodded gratefully, though a strange reluctance tempered her relief. The goal that had driven her through impossible. Circumstances suddenly seemed less urgent than the man beside her. "And second," Jack prompted, sensing more news. Reynolds produced an official-looking document. "This just arrived from the Territorial Governor's office. Apparently, our reports about Mercer's activities prompted a review of certain land records." He handed the paper to Jack. "The Cherokee Treaty lands that included your ranch have been officially recognized. Mercer's claims were fraudulent." Jack studied the document with unconcealed surprise. "This acknowledges the original boundaries established in my uncle's time." "Indeed," Reynolds confirmed. "Furthermore, as the legal owner of that property, you're entitled to compensation for damages from whoever burned your ranch." A knowing look crossed his face, Officially, we're still investigating that fire's cause, of course. The implications hung silently between them. With Mercer's men turning against him and official recognition of Jack's land rights, the balance of power had shifted dramatically. "What of my homestead?" Emma asked suddenly. "And the wagon we abandoned?" Reynolds smiled slightly. "My men recovered your wagon 2 days ago, the axles repaired, and your belongings are secure at our stables." His expression grew more serious. "As for your homestead, Mrs. Wilson, I'm afraid land abandoned for certain periods can be subject to claim by others under territorial law." The news didn't distress Emma as much as it might have earlier. The homestead represented Thomas's dream, not necessarily her own. Whatever future awaited, she had learned that safety and connection mattered more than specific acres of land. In the days that followed, Jack's recovery accelerated, his natural vitality reasserting itself with proper care and nutrition. Emma devoted herself to his rehabilitation while caring for the twins, who became favorites among the outpost's personnel. Lucas particularly charmed the soldiers with his attempts to mimic their military posture, while Lily's contemplative gaze and rare smiles were treasured moments for all who witnessed them. 2 weeks after their arrival at Eagle Pass, Emma sat beside Jack on a bench outside the infirmary, enjoying rare spring sunshine that had temporarily softened winter's grip. The twins napped peacefully in a makeshift cradle nearby. "Your sisters. A party should arrive within days," Jack observed, testing his healing leg by carefully extending and flexing it. "The latest report says the main road is finally passable." Emma nodded, watching a cavalry patrol return through the main gates. "The journey to Silverdale will be considerably less eventful than our arrival here, I expect." Jack studied her profile for a long moment before asking quietly, "Is Silverdale still your destination of choice?" The question carried weight beyond its simple wording. Emma considered carefully before responding. "It was my only option when I left Widow's Ridge, a place of safety for my children. And now?" Jack pressed gently. Emma turned to meet his gaze directly. "Now I understand that safety isn't just about location. It's about having someone willing to stand beside you against whatever storms life brings." Her voice softened. "You've shown me what that looks like, Jack." Something profound shifted in Jack's expression, hope carefully tempered by consideration for her circumstances. "I have nothing to offer but a burned-out ranch that needs rebuilding from the ground up," he said honestly. "And a man with mixed blood faces challenges in this territory that won't disappear with Mercer." "Are you trying to dissuade me or yourself?" Emma asked with unexpected directness. A smile slowly spread across Jack's face, not his usual reserved half-smile, but something fuller and more genuine. "I've learned not to argue with a woman who crossed mountains in a blizzard with infant twins. Seems a losing proposition." Emma laughed softly, the sound drawing the attention of a passing soldier who smiled reflexively at the rare sound of feminine mirth in the military outpost. "A wise policy, Mr. Calloway?" Jack's expression grew more serious as he reached for her hand. "I can't replace what you lost, Emma. Wouldn't try to. But if you're willing, I'd stand beside you while you build something new. For yourself and those little ones." The simple sincerity of his offer moved Emma deeply. "And if that something new included you, not as a replacement for what was lost, but as something completely different, then I'd consider myself fortunate, beyond measure," Jack replied quietly. They sat in comfortable silence, hands joined, watching sunlight play across the awakening landscape. The future held no certainties. Mercer remained at large, the ranch needed rebuilding, and society's prejudices wouldn't vanish overnight. But they had survived impossible odds already. Everything else seemed manageable by comparison. When Emma's sister finally arrived at Eagle Pass a week later, She found not a destitute widow seeking charity, but a woman who had discovered her own remarkable strength. The decision to rebuild at Broken Spoke Ranch, rather than continue to Silverdale, was Emma's own, made with clear-eyed assessment of both challenges and possibilities. The wedding was small, performed by Captain Reynolds himself under military authority granted to commanding officers in frontier territories. Jack stood straight despite his healing leg, his dark eyes never leaving Emma's face as they exchanged vows witnessed by soldiers, Emma's sister and brother-in-law and the twins, now able to sit upright and observe the proceedings with solemn curiosity. "Not the life you envisioned when you came west," Jack observed quietly as they prepared to depart the outpost, their wagon loaded with supplies donated by soldiers who had grown fond of the unusual family. Emma adjusted Lucas more securely in his carrier before meeting Jack's gaze. "No," she agreed, "it's something I never could have imagined, harder in some ways, richer in others." She glanced at the twins, then back to the man who had risked everything to save them. "But it's ours." As their wagon rolled through Eagle Pass's gates toward the future they would build together, Emma felt neither the naive optimism of her first journey west, nor the desperate determination of her flight through the blizzard. Instead, she carried the quiet certainty of a woman who had discovered her capacity to face whatever challenges awaited, not alone, but alongside someone who valued strength and vulnerability in equal measure. The Montana winter had nearly claimed their lives, but in doing so had revealed something essential about both of them. Not just the will to survive, but the courage to begin again. Not just endurance, but the capacity for joy even in harsh circumstances. Not just the need for safety, but the deeper human longing for connection that made safety meaningful. As they crested the ridge that would eventually lead them back to Broken Spoke Ranch, the spring sunshine illuminated the vast landscape before them, daunting in its wildness, breathtaking in its beauty. Their path forward wouldn't be easy, but they would face it together, step by step, day by day, building something that neither could have created alone. And perhaps that, Emma reflected as Jack's hand found hers, was the most unexpected gift of all. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.